A very warm welcome to all of you today to the Good Food for All flagship event at Expo 2020 Dubai. My name is Lorna Maseko. I'm an international celebrity chef, cookbook author, and media personality from South Africa. And ladies and gentlemen, I am so thrilled to guide you through today's events as your master of ceremonies. Now, during this afternoon's event, we're bringing together everyone: farmers, indigenous peoples, young people, government leaders, business, citizens of the world, to carve a path to a world where good food for all is a reality. Because the future of the world depends on good food, and it's literally that simple. Ladies and gentlemen, good food keeps us healthy. It helps us reach our potential. It strengthens communities, it powers our economies, and protects our planet. However, not everyone gets good food every day, and the ways that we produce, transport, and market food is harming our environment. This is why we're all here today, to hear from a series of inspiring and knowledgeable experts, as well as advocates, on how we can accelerate ambition and scale to change this to ensure we achieve good food for people and the planet. We are so excited, and I am as well, about the engaging keynote speeches, panel discussions, presentations that await us this afternoon, and encourage all of you, our audience, encourage all of you, our audience, to engage in the interactive parts of the event, including virtual polls, which I'll introduce to you in just a minute. You'll also have a chance to ask questions of our distinguished speakers at various points during the event in the Q&A session. Lastly, let me share that outside the venue, a fantastic exhibit is waiting for you after the event, with delicious tastings, interactive learning activities, and more. But more on that a little later. Now, before we kick off, I'd like to mark a few notes of thanks. Firstly, a very warm thank you to Her Excellency Reem Al-Hashimi, Emirati Minister of State for International Cooperation and Managing Director for Expo 2020 Dubai, as well as to PepsiCo for co-hosting the Good Food for All flagship event. Thank you to all our speakers for literally traveling across the globe to join and share your knowledge and insights with us today. And finally, our amazing guests for visiting Expo and for coming to today's session to champion good food for all.
Good food to me is having all the food groups that will fuel my body, give me the right nutrients, and boost my immunity to help me fight diseases. Remember, we're in a pandemic, right? And also we are looking at each and every person having good food. So from children under 1,000 days to the elderly, we are leaving no one behind.
It's all about embracing the greatest gifts of Mother Earth, planting trees, seeds, and connecting to the soil, connecting to the roots, growing your own food and veggies.
Good food is a manifestation, it's a celebration of locality and seasonality. It is the most intimate connection that we establish with people and the nature that's around us.
Moving to regenerative agriculture, valuing ecosystem services, reducing food waste, building rural livelihoods, respecting above all the rights of everybody, especially women. All of that within our reach.
Hello everybody, Chef José Andrés here. To me, good food means nutritious meals prepared with empathy and respect and delivered like a plate of hope to people in a moment of need. The work that my NGO, World Central Kitchen, has been doing for more than a decade. Good food nourishes both the body and the soul. Good food is good for the planet too. In the 21st century, we must feed ourselves in ways that don't contaminate and make us sick, hungry, and poorer. Good food means that chefs like me, who have been part of feeding the few, must also be part of feeding the many. I believe in longer tables, and I believe in good food for all.
Is that food produced with integrity, meaning with the health of the planet in mind? Are the producers of that food able to have a dignified living with the food of their production? And lastly, is that food wholesome, nutritious, delicious, and most importantly, accessible to all? If yes is the answer to these questions, to me, that's what good food for all means.
Good food is about people first. Good food is about our planet. So good food is what is good for all of us, people, planet, and our prosperity.
Good food allows us to get together and to celebrate family and cultural traditions.
Food can give hope, opportunity, health, that feeling of family, and it can give pride.
Good food means a plate of tasty, diverse foods. Different foods I remember from my childhood.
Good food to me is an innovative recipe that represents my culture, where my traditions and global ethic blend in harmony.
So in conclusion, a good food is good.
Fantastic. Now, from the 17th to the 23rd February, the Food, Agriculture and Livelihoods Week is taking place at Expo, during which many events and activations explore and discuss the question of how we can sustainably grow food to meet future demands. To do this, we have to sow the right seeds, ensuring agriculture works in harmony with our ecosystems. We must close the loop, cultivating responsible consumption habits to reduce food waste. And we must give everyone their fair share, transforming the way we produce and consume to ensure good food for all. Today, we have brought together citizens from across the globe to carve a path to such a world where good food for all is a reality. A world where good food is affordable and accessible, where governments and businesses work together to provide it, and where farmers in every country grow food in a way that protects our planet. Now, before we turn to the first speaker, whom I'm so excited about, I'd like us to reflect on what good food means to each and every one of us. We have amazing people in this room from all walks of life, and I'm really excited to be using Mentimeter today to help gather insights from you, our guests, throughout the event. Now, some of you may have already heard or even used Mentimeter before. The Mentimeter is an online tool which will make today's conversations even more engaging and fun, and which we'll use to do polls, quizzes, and word clouds. I'd like to invite you to think about which of the good food for all pillars is your favorite. You can see all the 8 pillars behind me on the screen and also on the sides of the hall. When you're ready, please open your smartphones, head to menti.com and type in code on the screen, or simply scan the QR code on the side screens that we have here. Then just follow the instructions, fill in the first poll, and click submit, and let's see what we come up with. All right. Okay, so it's quite clear that good food begins with farmers, and that's such an important fact that you've all highlighted, and it's clearly an important pillar that you all respect and want to advocate. Absolutely amazing. Let's do one more before getting into our first segment of the event. To get us thinking and delving into today's topic, let's think about what good food means to you, our audience. Once ready, take out your smartphone yet again and just continue on the same screen to the next question. If you've closed your Menti.com page, just open it again with the same code or rescan the QR code. Type in one or a few words. Please don't write a full sentence or long sentences on what good food means to you, and then we should see a beautiful word cloud appearing on our slide. Amazing. So quite interesting words that are popping up. Good food is joy, it's love, it's health, it's nutritious. Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for helping us set the stage for today's event. It's now my great pleasure to introduce the first speaker of the day, Dr. Gunhild Stordalen, who's the founder and executive chair of EAT. Dr. Stordalen is here with us to talk about why good food is all about love. Because at the heart of our broken food system, the effects of which are being felt all over the world, is still food. And good food is about love. The love of flavor, the love of health, of celebration, of culture, of memories, and of adventure. The love of children, friends, and family. The love of people, and of course, the love of the planet. Without further ado, please, ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome onto stage Dr. Gunhild Stordalen.
Thank you, Rockstar. Hi, everyone. I'm here to talk about food and love. Some of you might now be asking, like Tina Turner, so what's love got to do with it? But then you have the Beatles, right? All you need is love. If that is true, and I think almost all of humanity instinctively agree with the Beatles here, then, well, you can't really separate love and food, can you? We need both, and the two go together. Not a single second goes by on planet Earth without someone, somewhere, saying things like, I love pizza, I love Thai food, or I love my mother's home-baked breads, or simply, I love food. Our day-to-day language connects the two, telling us how important food is to us, how much we appreciate a good meal. It's about taste, smell, texture. Lots of things to love about food. But it goes well beyond that. Food is also, or maybe even especially, about connection and community. Breaking bread together. The stuff we do with our loved ones, with our families, with our colleagues, with our friends, that brings us together. Food is perhaps the most important catalyst there is for people to connect with each other. And when that happens, love can emerge, love can be restored, love can be cemented between people around the table. Just like the amazing smell of a hot stew filling the room where people sit down to eat, so can that mysterious vapor, that amazing force of love, fill that same room. You know what I'm talking about here, right? Well, it's not always like that, I know. But when it is, what can be better? Very little can be better, I would argue, except perhaps when that mysterious vapor is, you know, of that amorous kind. Because dating and food goes together like bread and butter, like salad and dressing. And after a tasty, fulfilling meal with that special someone, well, who knows what happens next? But that's definitely love. Well, not necessarily, but it feels a lot better when it is. It's the stuff that children are sometimes made from, and we all love children, right? But it doesn't stop there, because love is so much more. We have been taught by the great prophets of religion to love the neighbor as yourself. And that basically means all of humanity, and especially those less fortunate, especially those in need. How do we do that? Well, in many ways. But if it doesn't include food for those who are hungry, don't call it love. If it doesn't include dignity for all our farmers, all our fisher folks that are producing our food, don't call it love. And this responsibility goes way beyond individual charity. It goes way beyond the social work of so many great voluntary initiatives, great as those are. It's a societal responsibility and the responsibility of governments especially. Love translated into meaningful, responsible policy. We need a whole lot more of that love, folks. It doesn't stop there either, because must we not also demonstrate our love for the entire amazing web of life that surrounds and upholds us on this planet Earth, and from which all our food comes from? Unfortunately, we have not yet really learned this as humanity. In fact, judging by our actions, you would think that we hate our planet and its abundance of life with a vengeance, hell-bent as we seem on destroying it as quickly as possible, and with that, all the living beings that we convert into our food. We are waging a headless, relentless war on our pantry every day. Think about that for a second. I don't normally bring Jesus from Nazareth into my speeches, I must admit, but today I'm going to do so. Jesus said some 2,000 years ago that when we gather together to eat and drink, we basically connect directly with the divine. Because God is the upholder of all living beings, also the living plants and animals that we transform into our food. He said, "This is my flesh, this is my blood." And Christians call this insight communion. And communion is all about love. Unfortunately, too many Christians have ignored this particular meaning of communion, reducing it to something less than what it actually means. And this failure goes way beyond Christianity. In our modern world, with our almost all-consuming quest for more stuff, more instant gratification, more power and more glory, we have all forgotten too much of the old wisdom from our forebears, including the great religious traditions. Islam has a lot to say about stewardship of the creation, about caring for soils, caring for water resources, caring for our animals. The Chinese Taoist concepts of yin and yang are a powerful explanatory framing of the climate crisis and our responsibility for tackling it. So if we are to stand any chance of securing a good future for humanity on this planet, we have to change our ways, and we have to change it fast. We need to convert. Yes, we do. Shift our mindsets and shift our behavior. We have to fall in love with food and stay in love with food. And here I mean love in all the manifestations that I've just talked about. If we do, real magic will happen. We can still achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, another great expression of what love really means in our day and age. So when it comes to food, it's all about love. All you need is love. Thank you so much, and thanks for being here.
What an incredible powerhouse. Ladies and gentlemen, I definitely think she needs another round of applause because food is love. Thank you so much, Dr. Stordalen, for this insightful presentation, which truly set the tone for today's conversation and highlighted at the heart of good food, celebration, joy, love, culture, and tradition play a massive role. Now, before heading into the first panel, which I'm super excited about, I thought it might be nice to get to know each other a little better. I'm sure that most of you, just like me, have had a favorite food here at Expo or enjoyed something that you really love in your country. Maybe at Expo as well, or as I've mentioned, in your country. But why not take a minute to turn to the person on your right or your left and just share with them what your special dish or favorite dish that you love. I know it can be daunting because you don't probably know the person on your right or your left, but let's interact, let's connect. That's what we're here for. Don't be shy, no one's going to bite. Fantastic. I think these conversations may have gotten you a little bit hungry, but most importantly, I hope you got to meet someone new, which is really, really important this afternoon. Now, let us take a step back and travel to where the journey of our food starts. Good food begins with farmers, with those men and women on the front lines of our food systems and climate crisis who work incredibly hard and often under very difficult circumstances. Farmers are the backbone of civilization, tirelessly working to put food on our tables, provide access to food, and supply the ingredients that make the meals we absolutely love. Now, in this first panel discussion during our Good Food for All event, Cherry Atilano, a social entrepreneur, public speaker, UN food systems champion, and agriculture expert, as well as founding farmer, CEO, and president of Agria, Agricultural System International, will moderate a conversation with a focus on why farmers are at the heart of bringing good food to all. The conversation will discuss the nexus between climate, health, agriculture, and how we can all drive action. As we're heading into our first panel discussion, let me set a few ground rules for the Q&A. Please raise your hand to indicate your interest in asking a question. My colleagues will walk around the room to pass you the microphone. Please ensure that you keep your mask on at all times, also when asking the question. Stand up to speak, and please keep your questions short and precise, and only ask one question per person. Kindly state your name and where you're from. This will also apply to all the Q&A segments throughout the event. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our moderator, Cherry Atilano, as well as our panelists. Our panelists include Elizabeth Nsi Madala, farmer, agripreneur, president of Eastern Africa Farmers Federation, and director of the Women Affairs Pan-Africa Farmers Organization. Next up, we have Christina Bauerman, the only female Michelin star chef in Rome. How amazing. TEDx speaker and author. Next up, we have Pramisha Tapalia, UN Food Systems Summit Ambassador and Youth Liaison, climate activist. She's joining us virtually. There she is. And lastly, Dr. Annika Molesworth, farmer, environmental scientist, storyteller, and author. Ladies, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for that very beautiful introduction, Lorna. A happy, healthy, and holistic day, everyone. And I want you to take a pause before I enjoy our conversation. Take a pause that if you eat today and every day in your life, please thank a farmer from the bottom of your hearts. Can you please do that? Let's just close our eyes for 5 seconds. Thank you for doing such honor. Thank you for dignifying our farmers. Thank you for respecting our farmers. We saw during the first survey in our Menti that good food begins with farmers is the #1. However, though, we always say that the farmers are the problem in our food systems. But I'm here with our 4 panelists who are making ways that farmers are actually the solutions in a lot of problems in our food systems. Farmers, if we are empowering them, if we are enabling them, if we are giving them the right environment to thrive, the right environment for food generation, for income making, and for stability of their family to create sustainable livelihood, and for equality, especially for women and girls in the agriculture sector, for talking about sustainability of our aging farmers, including the next generation, and also tackling about climate changes as farmers a solution in terms of climate mitigation. I think we are solving more than half of the problems in the world. So we are here right now because, to give you a little bit of background, I work in the Philippines. My social enterprise, Agrea, we work with 30,000 smallholder farmers in the Philippines. And I started teaching farmers at the age of 12 because at 11, I read a book about biointensive gardening. And growing up in a sugarcane farm where my family is, it's always like a crime against humanity that the producers in the food chain, the farmers are the hungriest, the poorest, and the most malnourished. It's such a big crime. And every day, since I was 12, I started biking around the sugarcane farm and teaching every single farmer to grow their own vegetables. Because from the book that inspired an 11-year-old girl, it says, if you're poor and if you're a farmer, 70% of your income goes to rice. I'm Filipino, I eat rice every day. And 30% of your income goes to your viand. But if you know how to plant vegetables around your house, you can save that 30%. You can send your children to school and have a roof in your head. So for more than 2 decades, this fight is still worth fighting for because I believe that everyone in the room is together with us in this fight, together with 4 ladies in this panel. So I think I'll start asking one of the amazing women. I happen to work in the UN food systems. Elizabeth, tell me about the importance role of women. And actually, this is a women panel. So can we clap our, because most of the time, women are not given the right voices. I think we brought our sofas here on stage right now to claim this. And Elizabeth, because you've been working a lot on women, and girls to be included in making an equitable, sustainable, and a food systems that will create abundance for everyone. Can you tell me about what you do in Uganda in particular?
Yeah, thank you so much, Cherry. And I'm happy to join my colleagues in Dubai to talk about food, of course, which is my day-to-day work that I do with over 25 million smallholder farmers under Eastern Africa Farmers Federation, and the over 80 million smallholder farmers under the Pan-Africa Farmers Organization, where I sit as the director in charge of women. I'm super excited that today we are talking about good food for all, which is our day-to-day business, our day-to-day economy as smallholder farmers. And I'm happy that everyone is acknowledging the role and importance that smallholder farmers play, and most especially the role that women and girls play in transforming the food systems. As you are all aware, over 60% of food, particularly in Africa, is produced by women. And that is the same in my own country, Uganda, where I come from. But when you look at the contribution of women towards transformation of the food systems, it's enormous, and everyone acknowledges that. Because as women and girls, we have a multiplier effect. Give us anything, we will multiply it. But when it comes to the economic benefits, we usually take the raw deal, because most cases we are usually at the beginning of the value chain. When you look at women's participation in the value chains, it's usually at production, a bit of marketing, agro-processing, little or less women and girls are involved. And this, of course, limits us to, economic benefits from the agriculture sector. And because also the customs, the cultures, the patriarchal nature of our systems also limit women from benefiting from the agriculture space. They have limited access to land, of course, which limits them to access financing, because most of the traditional financing instruments in Africa, in my country, Uganda, and other countries of Africa, require that you have to have security to access financing. In leadership roles, it's lately that we've seen women come up to take up leadership roles at the highest level. And this is because they are also limited by other responsibilities and roles they play as mothers, as sisters, as wives, or as in-laws to some families. But we can do more. We can do more. We really need to create more awareness. We need to have incentives and investments that are targeted towards women. And we need to have a collective action towards women empowerment.
I totally agree with you, Elizabeth. In the Philippines, we've been working a lot, especially also in Southeast Asia, because there's so much inequality in women. And what you do is so admirable. And it's always like when you invest in a woman in a farming community, you actually invest in the entire community. And let's go to Chef Christina. Chef, I enjoyed everything that you have in Rome. And last night, I was listening to you, in our gathering with the Chef Manifesto. And your words just inspired everyone. Can you tell us about your work with the farmers in Italy, but more than that, your engagement with Chef Manifesto?
Yes. Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so excited to be here and meet all these people that have brilliant and amazing ideas. They just give you energy just listening to them. I grew up in Puglia. Puglia is in Italy, and it's the Hill of the Boot. And right now, I've been working in Rome for the last almost 17 years. I've been running the same restaurant, by the way, which is, for me, it's a great success because most of the time, it's really difficult to work in a big city. And I grew up with a connection in general to the farm, to the producer. My father used to go to that guy to buy bread. My mother used to tell me, a few minutes walk from home, can you go get broccoli rabe? So I grew up with this connection to whoever produced my food. And I brought with me this connection as I grew up, first as a consumer and then as a chef. And I was doing things, you know, I was looking for that farmer. I refused to buy stuff that was very cheap because I would ask myself, especially in the south of Italy, we have a huge problem of exploitation of labor in the farms. And so I grew up with this connection. At the same time, I was trying to do something, but honestly, I couldn't really understand what. Sometimes, you know, it was for me, it seemed too easy to just say things, state things without doing anything. Until I participated, I was the only female ambassador in 2015 at Expo that put on the table a huge problem, the paradox of nutrition. And from there, right after, I met Chef Manifesto. And at that point, connecting with all these chefs all around the world, talking about issues, and understanding exactly how, from words, could actually do something, I knew exactly how to channel my energy. Right after, I was one of the founder and president since then of an important national association in Italy called Ambasciatori del Gusto. And we've always been working because the symbiosis, the connection that there's between farms and chefs is inevitable, thank goodness. And we came up, actually, I proposed this program and was very much accepted, so much that this project, which is called Adopt a Farmer, is supported by the Ministry of Agriculture in Italy. And it's basically simple. It goes, you know, from words to action. Every chef, every ambassador chooses a product, possibly local, that knows that it's ethically grown and protects the biodiversity. In my particular case, I chose a citrus that grows in Lazio, and even people from Lazio don't even know of the existence of that. They always ask me, what is it? Where does it come from? They think some kind of exotic place. I'm like, no, it's just here around the corner. And adopting a farmer doesn't mean also fulfilling an educational need, which is the citrus, grows in Lazio, and all whatever is connected to that product, but also helps the farmer because you have to use that product in your restaurant. And especially through the pandemic, it was so important because it supported the farmers. We've done several actions, but this is a model that can be replicable all over the world. It doesn't cost anything, and it's actually an enrichment, not only for the farmer, but also for the chefs. This is one of the call to action that honestly, Chef Manifesto and the connection with all the chefs all around the world inspired me to propose.
You're so inspiring, Chef Christina, no? And for a Michelin star chef, a lot are just busy in the kitchen, garnering another star, gardening another star. But I think you are the chef who's giving more stars and garnering more stars because of helping our farmers and really putting your restaurant that farmers are the center and the core of your work. And that's truly inspiring, who works with the farmers and a farmer myself. But let's go to Australia. We're representing several continents here in this discussion. Anika, you work in Australia in an arid region, traveling all the way here in Dubai, that is also an arid country. Can you tell us about your fight in climate change and the situation of Australian farmers in this fight towards, 6 years of drought, as we were talking about it?
Yeah, thank you, Cherry. And so inspiring to hear from Chef here, because I do consider the chefs and the farmers as co-workers, and everyone actually in the room. We all eat food every single day, and the choices we make when we sit down at the table, what we put on the plate in front of us, does feed back to what the farmer is doing out in the field. So as Cherry mentioned, I come from a very arid part of Australia, and I feel quite at home here in Dubai, looking at the beautiful arid landscape out the windows. And on my family's farm, we raise sheep and goats, and I absolutely love being a farmer. Every day I feel such pride and joy and celebration to be able to grow food that goes to feed and nourish people, to keep people healthy and continuing in their lives. But the problem with climate change, it means that food production is becoming increasingly challenging, more challenging. And in Australia, we are no strangers to extreme weather events, droughts, floods, bushfires, dust storms. are events that we're experiencing more frequently and more intensely. And this is also a common theme right across the world, with temperatures increasing, with seasons changing their behavior, with rainfall increasing in some places and decreasing dramatically in others, with changes in pests and disease distribution and prevalence. And this makes it very difficult when you're out in the field and you're trying to actually produce food, when you're managing water resources, when you're trying to take care of the welfare of your livestock, the soil fertility. And so farmers are trying to learn on the run. They are doing incredible jobs adapting to these changes, but there are limits to the adaptations because plants and animals, they do have thresholds in temperature and dryness, salinity, and all of these things. And so farmers can't do this alone. They can't solve the climate problem by themselves. And that's why we need everyone, with the bright ideas and the innovations coming forward and having these discussions of how do we actually feed the world well in a climate-challenged world, and what we need to do today to prevent runaway climate change. And there's many things that we can do from the field right through to the plate. And that's where the conversation starts to get very exciting.
So here you've listened about the gender equality that we need to have in changing our food systems, the intervention of chefs who are, as I always say, right, it takes 3 to 5 months to grow a carrot and 3 to 5 seconds for a chef to chop it off. I think Chef Christina would agree with me. And Anika talking about climate changes. But you know what? I've been advocating also for young people to be engaged in agriculture because I feel that farmers are globally aging. 60 years old average age of farmers in the world. I call them endangered species. And now we have an amazing young lady on screen, Pramisha, who is a UN Food System Champions advocate for youth in agriculture. So Pramisha, because you couldn't make it here, but then of course we want to hear your voice, we want to know about your work. Tell us about more on how we can engage the young generation in changing the food systems and making good food for all that begins with farmers.
Thank you so much, Cherry, for this important question, and such a pleasure to be here in this important women-packed panel. Gunhild earlier said dating and food go together, and I want to add good food and young people also go together. All we need to do is to love this next generation the way we love the food. So good food for all cannot be achieved without the engagement of young people. So let's start with the problem first. As Cherry also already mentioned, the problem is young people have been increasingly disconnected from both farming, agriculture, and also the other areas of the food systems. So how to bring these young people back into farming, especially young farmers and young entrepreneurs, is an important task of today. So I'll basically touch on 3 main aspects on how we can make agriculture cool and sexy to young people. First and foremost, I think many people simply don't know the cool ways and innovative ways for doing agriculture, and people still view agriculture as tiring and labor-requiring work, which is also true in many developing and underdeveloped countries where agriculture has very little resources to work with. So capacity building and financing for agriculture is very important, as Elizabeth also talked about this earlier. So in terms of young people, we need to educate and build the capacity of young people who are interested in agriculture. Similarly, young farmers as well as young entrepreneurs need to be supported financially to make agriculture convenient. For example, loans with a small interest rate, microfinancing, insurance subsidies, to name a few. Second, I think young people are the one who can easily innovate, adopt, and implement new innovations and technology. So we need to tap that potential. It is also important to mobilize young people for the protection of rural agriculture, to save our seeds, and to implement practices like agroecology so that they can drive the transformation in their communities in the midst of climate crisis. Third, it is also very important that we need to give considerable seats to young people at the policy level. And while saying so, national and local governments need to play an important role to tap their potential. So we can see that youths are most vocal as well as sensitive to the issues of climate change. We can see this all over the world. So bringing youths to the table of food and agriculture policy will also help to shape the agriculture and food systems which are resilient to climate change and other crises. And we all know that food systems and climate change are inextricably related, and they are the part of the both problems and solutions. So thank you, and back to you, Cherry.
Thank you very much, Pramisha, for joining us from the USA. And now I would like to open the panel discussion to our audience questions. Just make sure you put on your mask when you go to the microphone for your question. And feel free, there are microphones maybe at the center of the hall, and then you can go there and ask your question. Just make sure to put your mask on. Thank you. Okay, there we have someone raising the hand. Sir, can you please go to the microphone and...
Hi, thank you very much. Chef Arthur Potts-Dawson, as part of the Chef's Manifesto. I was involved in COP26 in Glasgow this year, and quite a lot of the discussion that came from that was around financing and understanding how we can finance future disruptive weather patterns, but also how we would finance perhaps farmers, women and young farmers. Is there anything from the panel that you could talk to us about what type of support you would need if financing was to come from a government level, and how would either financing women, young women, perhaps in Africa, or how do we mitigate climate change in Australia, and what type of financing requirements would farmers need to look into the future, the next 5 or 10 years, because finance is a big part of this, right?
Okay, thank you so much, sir. If my audibility is right, you're talking about the financing requirement, am I right? Okay, the financing requirement of farmers in climate-stricken or challenged Australia, and the climate financing of women and girls involved in the agriculture. Is that right? Perfect. I have, I think, good audibility. You know, it's so difficult to hear when you're wearing a mask. So I think I'll ask Anika to answer the first question on the financing requirement of farmers in climate change, and I'll give the floor to Elizabeth for your second question. Perfect.
Sure. Well, two things need to happen. I mean, we need to adapt to the climate changes that are already in place, so farmers can actually continue to grow food in the higher temperatures and reduced rainfall environments that they are already experiencing and will continue to experience for the next period of time. And then obviously we also need to mitigate, as in reduce the emissions that we're producing on farm. And for us to adapt and mitigate emissions, there needs to be investment into research, development, extension. So we absolutely need new innovations, new ideas, new technologies being rolled out and made accessible to farmers, and not just farmers in wealthy countries, but all farmers around the globe, especially those who are in more vulnerable situations. We obviously then need the farmers contributing to those ideas too, because it should not ever be, you know, a one-way flow of information, of ideas being developed in academic, you know, ivory towers. But farmers have these lived experiences. They know their soils, their plants, their animals better than anyone else. And if anyone can provide us good information of how to increase soil fertility, how to look after the animals better, it's the farmers. And so it's brilliant that the farmer voice is part of this discussion today. And then the extension side of things, we need better conversations, we need better storytelling, and again, not that one-way flow of information, but we need that information getting up to the policymakers and those in business, so we can see that more large-scale transformative change. So investment into research, development, and extension.
Thank you, Anita. So investment in research and extension, and of course, putting more platforms for farmers to have this kind of conversations. Elizabeth, the investments of women and girls needed to progress to work in the food systems.
Yeah, thank you. So when you look at the kind of financing that is required for women and girls, of course, it's across the entire value chain, starting from the production to the marketing bit and then the agro-processing. But I would like to categorize it into three under the input section where women and girls would require financing to access certified inputs, including, for example, fertilizer, seed, animal, let's say, drugs and so forth. Then in the service sector is where now there's also need for financing to have access to, for example, insurance, extension services, because when you look at the extension available in our different countries, it is really alarming. So most of the extension service provision is usually by the private sector, and this is where farmers also require funds to be able to pay for extension services. Then looking at the market bit, the market side, of course, usually prices, all of you, know that prices usually at the harvest time are very low. So farmers would need to, collectively bulk the produce, but before you store, you have to do processing. At least you add value on the product, then you store it. You need to have good storage facilities. You need to have some sort of records management at that level. So there's also some bit of financing that is required. And because farmers, and especially girls and women, have other needs and necessities, so they would need financing to take care of their personal needs at that time of harvesting so that they are able to keep the produce for 1, 2, or 3 more months until when the prices are high so that they can put that on the market. But when you look at the available financing currently, especially to do with development banks, for someone to access that financing, you have to have security, which is in form of title deeds or any other, tangible security. And this is where the challenge is, because women and girls, for example, don't have ownership of land, so they lack such kind of facility. So what happens is that then they cannot access financing. So what I would advocate for is innovative financing. For example, where women and girls can be able to, let's say, get some loans using their mobile phones, where, let's say, their production can be recorded and used to have access to financing. Thank you.
So there are a lot of innovative interventions now that are actually being developed on how to really support our smallholder farmers, our women and girls, even the youth to really progress into entrepreneurship. In respect of time, I think I can only get one last question before we wrap up and do a call to action from all our speakers.
There's a woman right there.
Yes.
There's a woman right there.
There's one.
Hi, this question is for Christina. My name is Wadi, and I'm a proud foodie that enjoys dining out and cooking good food. And one thing I always wish for restaurants to have, since you've worked in that industry, is that they always try and source something locally from and have a direct relationship with farmers and get that highly nutritious food, because when you eat their meals, you can notice a difference in the taste of tomatoes or potatoes or broccoli, and it's usually indicative of the freshness or the level of nutrients. Of course, every restaurant wants to have the yummiest foods, but unfortunately, they are faced with commercial choices. Their margins are low. And in your industry, have you worked with restaurants to encourage them or motivate them to form these bonds and not go through the cheapest commercial route of the mass-produced produce? And if you had success, are there any strategies that you know that have worked to convince these restaurants to do that and have that closer connection to local farmers or even better quality food? I'd love to hear that and maybe share that with some of the restaurants locally. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. As I mentioned earlier, Adopt a Farmer is actually aims at doing that, at creating this bond that it's basically how farmers and restaurants develop a relationship that is extremely solid. But I do think, honestly, as a restaurateur, as an entrepreneur, actually entrepreneurs, I think that you have to create role models. Exactly like in women leadership, you have to give the example. So you have to be the one that a little girl in maybe higher, high school looks at you and says, if she did it, I can do it. Well, that's the same thing, the same model that you have to adopt in your restaurant, the way that you do business. I'm talking about probably at least 15 years ago, I used to get my herbs and vegetables by a guy who lived all the way up in north of Italy. And the reason is because he was an ethical farmer, organic farmer. He had amazing, he still does, amazing stuff. Throughout my action, that is buying stuff from him, having shipped it to my restaurant and so on, I started to talk about him. I was not the only one because there were some other chefs in the north of Italy. This guy started to acquire a name. Well, he trained one of the guys from Lazio who actually opened a little farm not far away from Rome, and that's where I get my herbs from. So I think that role modeling in this sense is particularly important. Whenever you find a farmer or a producer, not necessarily a farmer, but they're all connected, that has a particular small production that needs to be, because that's what it is. You have to protect and you have to support whoever does a job that doesn't aim at money, but it's about passion. That's when you have to intervene and say, I am going to support you no matter what. I've done many coalitions with friends, with chefs in the city, and not only that, not only in Rome, but also in Italy. For instance, to buy an entire field of artichokes or potatoes or whatever, that's how you do it. And that's how I try to do it. It's really difficult, and the pandemic has really stressed, has put on the table a very important problem, which is what she was talking about. How can I, and also her, how can I actually put on the market produce that lasts maybe 3, 4, 5 days? And if you come all the way from hundreds of miles from where the market is, then your product is going to be spoiled. And you have to make sure that your farmer is protected buying, no matter what, that product, even if it's spoiled.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chef Christina. I think we just really need to go out of our comfort zone to do changes out there for the lives of our farmers. I think for the last call, I would like to ask Elizabeth, because I know, Elizabeth, you've been working so hard enough, day and night, to work on this consensus of millions of farmers all over the world. So maybe this is our call to action to close this very wonderful panel.
Yes, thank you. I know we've run out of time, but together under the coordination of SDG2 Advocacy Hub, the Pan-Africa Farmers Organization, Eastern Africa Farmers Federation, IISD, and the World Farmers Organization, plus other actors, we've been working on a consensus. Like you've seen under the Mentimeter, when they asked the question on what does good food mean for everyone, we all had different answers. So we are trying to work on a consensus by, bringing and believing in holistic partnerships where we are building an ecosystem of different partners. We are trying to have a collective action when it comes to good food for all. And yet, as farmers, we are at the center. What does it mean for us as farmers? We are trying to hold each and everyone accountable. There are many commitments that are being made at different meetings. The other day, we had the United Nations Food System Summit. We had the COP26. We are moving towards COP27. But who is following up on all these commitments, and what does it mean for farmers? So this is the global policy consensus that we are working towards, and it's a call for action for everyone so that we can collectively have good food for all.
Wow, this is a wonderful panel. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, Chef Christina, Anika, and Pramisha. The call for the consensus of farmers all over the world. So right now, guys, let's stop the talking. The farmers will make each and every one of us, not only in this room, but each and every one of us who eats every day, to be accountable in all our commitments. Thank you very much, and have a happy, healthy, and holistic day, everyone, and enjoy the Expo.
Absolutely amazing. I think that is correct, Sherry. We all need to be accountable, which I absolutely love. Thank you to all of you for this truly inspiring panel discussion, highlighting the crucial role of farmers in our food systems and elevating the critical role of women and girls in the farming industry to drive action and change. Farming is where the good food grows, but how do we ensure it reaches the most vulnerable, the ones who need it the most, like our next generation? It's my pleasure to introduce the next keynote speaker, Wawira Njuru, a Kenyan businesswoman, philanthropist, nutritionist, and executive director of Food for Education, who will talk to us about her journey and make the case why investing in school feeding programs is so integral to expanding productivity and building thriving communities. Your inspirational story truly demonstrates that good food makes progress possible. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. My name is Wawira Njuru, and I am excited to be here. Before I start speaking, I want us to go back to school. When you're in school, it's lunchtime, and the bell rings. What was your favorite food in school? So we're going to use a Mentimeter. It's on the screen, and we're going to say, type in what your favorite food was. For me, for example, my favorite food was rice and stew. It sort of still is. I'm interested to hear from you guys what your favorite food was. We have a couple of options: sandwich, seafood pasta. Wow, which schools are that? Pizza, sandwich and banana, chicken and mayonnaise, ham and cheese sandwich, yum. I love seafood pasta. I'm from Kenya, so we don't eat seafood pasta at lunchtime. Fruit juice. Wow. Vegetable sandwich. These are great options. These are very nutritious meals, too. So I'm a nutritionist also, so all this are great meals, and the pizza, too. So I'm here to talk about food in schools and make a case for why it's important for children when they're in school to have nutritious meals. The organization that I want to introduce to you is an organization that I founded when I was just 21 years old, and it's feeding the future of Kenya and Africa by providing nutritious meals to kids in school. In Africa, so in the world, 388 million children get school meals every day. Only under 14%, around 13.7% of these children are in Africa. Yet Africa has one of the largest populations of children in the world. In Kenya, the country that I'm from, 1 in 4 children are stunted due to poor undernutrition, and at least 51% of the population is food insecure. The adverse effects of COVID-19, for example, has left the situation for millions of people and families so dire and led to a 30% decrease in food expenditure. 43% of Kenya's population is under 15. They're of primary school age, but this population is the one that's bearing the brunt of undernutrition and a dire food situation. Hunger, as we've heard today, is a key impediment to the successful return of school children and the growth of children in general. So a hungry child cannot grow, they cannot learn, they can't do anything. If we don't act fast, the future of Kenya, Africa, and the world is at great risk because hungry children don't stay in school, they don't learn, and they're not able to build the futures that they want. In the last decade, Food for Education has provided schools over 6 million meals to kids in 25 schools across Kenya. We started in 2012. As I said, I started the organization when I was 21 years old, providing meals to just 25 children while studying my undergrad in nutrition and food sciences. Our innovation lies in the sourcing, production, and distribution of meals, and making these meals affordable and high quality to ensure that kids are able to access these meals while they're at school. We ensure that 33,000 kids every single day have access to meals and have a goal to reach 1 million kids every single day in the next 5 years. This year, we're going to reach 100,000 kids every single day. We are a nonprofit organization. We leverage community, parent, and government partnerships to expand national school feeding programs. For example, this year we're working with the Kenyan government to design their first national school feeding policy alongside other partners in the space, like the World Food Program. Our work involves local sourcing of meals. We source our food regionally and locally from farmers. We use sustainable financing. For example, we use technology where parents contribute for the meals through mobile money. They use NFC wristbands to be able to access the meals. The children use NFC wristbands. And we use a distribution channel of trucks where the trucks distribute meals to schools to ensure that kids have access to nutritious meals. So an NFC wristband essentially ensures a cashless way of kids accessing the meals. So it's a contactless way. It also ensures that kids have access wherever they are. So parents can top up and use mobile money as a savings tool for their children's nutrition. And when kids come to school, they're able to access the meals in just under 5 seconds. The same way you go shopping and you're able to tap your credit card and your debit card and access your meals is the same way children in our schools access their meals. Our technology, as I'm saying, is where parents are prepaying to mobile money, and that prepayment is going directly into an e-wallet that we've created and using NFC wristbands like this Apple Watch, but actually not an Apple Watch. And these NFC wristbands are what they're tapping. The same way you get lunch, you tap at a restaurant or when you're paying for something. Our meals are nutritionally sound. We provide around 650 grams of meals every day. And we ensure that 33,000 kids have access to meals. And we ensure that also the portions are enough for children. So we provide 650 grams with a protein, which is twice, actually. 650 grams is twice the average school feeding program, with a protein to carbohydrate ratio of 1 to 1.5. So we ensure that kids are getting the right nutrition, protein being very important for kids to grow and learn. We ensure that they get that. Food for Education has been operating now for close to 10 years and ensuring that every day that children are able to get a smile, they're able to get their nutritious lunches, and they're able to stay in school and learn. By using technology, when using a way of distribution of cooking meals and distributing them to the school, where kids are ensured every single day when the bell rings, they have access to their favorite meals. Not seafood pasta, but they get rice and beans, they get maize and beans, they get vegetables, they get fruit, they get meat to ensure that they're able to get the right nutrition. Our goal is huge. As I said, we're growing to feed 100,000 children this year and 1 million children over the next 5 years through use of central kitchens to cook the meals and to distribute them to schools. We work towards establishing an ecosystem that enables a concerted effort between teachers, school administrations, parents, local community, and government, and other partners to ensure that school feeding is sustainable, affordable, and locally owned. So parents contribute half the cost through our mobile money payments, and then we subsidize the rest of the cost. That's our work. We're so excited to be here and to be ensuring that children have access to nutritious meals, because we all remember our school meal. We all remember what it meant to us for the bell to ring and we're able to rush out of class and get lunch. And we're working to ensure that millions of kids have access to the same feeling and are able to have good food that enables them to grow and learn. Thank you.
Ms. Njiru, thank you so much for your inspiring words. I could have listened to these wonderful stories and the passion you share all day, literally. Now, as much as good food makes progress possible, as we've heard, good food is not always a choice. Quite the opposite, actually. It often is, disrupted by vulnerable, in jeopardy every day, from climate change to armed conflict. In our next segment, we hear from Majid Yahia, Director of the World Food Programme Office in the UAE and representative to the GCC, who has been working on providing food security in conflict zones. Interviewed by world-renowned food correspondent and journalist Thin Lewin, Mr. Yahia will elaborate on how conflict causes major disruption to safe, affordable, and accessible food, and why investment must be made in ensuring good food reaches conflict-affected regions. Please give them a round of applause.
Thanks very much, Lorna, for that introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. As Lorna said, my name is Thin, and I'm a journalist specializing in food systems. It's great to be here, and actually, it's greater to be doing meetings and interviews face-to-face again. It just felt like it's been a very long 2 years. Now, I think for the, past hour, you've heard from all these amazing speakers about what good food is and why it is so important. I think that actually, in the past, we have taken food for granted. Many of us have forgotten that if we get to eat 3 times a day, we're really fortunate. And we're even more fortunate if we get to choose what we eat. I think what's happened over the past 2 years with the global pandemic, I'm not sure if some of you remembers, but there were these empty supermarket shelves, that sort of scared people into panic buying, worrying about food access. I think that sort of pushed home the point to a lot of us that good food is not always a choice. Unfortunately, there are many places around the world where access to good food is not a choice for millions of people. That's a daily reality. And often, many of those places tend to be in conflict zones. In fact, out of the 20 current hunger hotspots, 14 are affected by conflict. So, how do conflict affect access to food? What can be done about it? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about for the next 10 to 15 minutes with Majid, who, as Lorna has already introduced, is the representative for the World Food Programme in the United Arab Emirates. He is originally from Sudan and is also a veteran humanitarian, as you can see from his field outfit. Majid? Thank you for being with us. Welcome. Now, we were talking earlier, and you were saying that you've been with the WFP for a very, very long time. In fact, a quarter of a century, if I remember correctly.
Correct.
I'm assuming that means that you have been to a lot of conflict zones.
Yes, unfortunately. Yeah, I have been. Most of my work has been in conflict-affected countries around the world, be it in Rwanda at the beginning, in Burundi, in Liberia, in Afghanistan, during the war in Lebanon, during the conflict in Darfur. So, and this is why we see like hunger, the main driver of hunger is conflict. So, and that's why we see the growing number of hungry people because of the growing scale of the conflicts around the world.
And, you know, if you could just paint us a picture, you know, people in this room as well as those who are watching online, what life is like in a conflict zone, as somebody who's been to many of them, as you said, unfortunately, what life is like in a conflict zone, particularly when it comes to access to good food?
Well, it's difficult to describe it, and it's difficult also to call it life, because what they go through, what happens, is literally something that you cannot imagine. So imagine like everything is fine, there is families getting together, eating together, children playing, going to school, parents are going to work, so life is normal, and suddenly that just trashes away. So everything is just changed over, like just upside down, in a matter of sudden that happens. So first thing, what they do is flee for their safety. That's the very first thing. And they take whatever belongings they may be able to take, but then safety is the first thing. So they get displaced from one place to another, and normally it takes like families or people to displace in like 3 times in their own country once there is a conflict in that, until then they seek refuge and cross the border into another country. So you can imagine what happens in that setting. But then also, because of the conflict, because of war, then you have markets start to get disrupted, supply chain disrupted, and access to food become like, the prices get increased because of the scarcity of food. So prices shoot high then. So this is also another reason that people, they cannot afford then to have or to buy the food because the prices. When conflict also break out, then it's a problem for us because how do we access this population? So it's like something that you cannot imagine, that just things happen overnight. People cross borders. Often, like mothers are just fleeing with their children because the husband or the father are either fighting or killed in the conflict. So the mother becomes responsible for 4 or 5 children going from one place to another. And in that setting also, they give up all their necessities, other necessities. So medical is given up. Other necessities are also given up. So the concentration is like food, because you need to survive here. And what food? Whatever food, that they fill them up. Not necessarily, of course, they have the choice to say, no, I'm not eating this, but I'll eat that. And this is where also like things become difficult also for all of them. And something it's really difficult to describe. Yeah.
I want to pick up on what you said just now about how, you know, food becomes such an important part when their lives are disrupted. But then good food becomes difficult to access and they can no longer choose. How do families in these situations cope? How do communities cope?
Well, of course, like first, food becomes the priority number 1. For whatever belonging they have, they sell it so that they can afford to give food. They reduce the number of meals. For example, the adults in a family or in a household, they stop eating and give the food, whatever they have, to the children. So people can then opt to eat 1 meal per day. That is a coping mechanism. Another way, they pull their children out of school so that they send them then to beg in the streets or work so that they earn some money to help in the household there. But there are other, like, sort of call it a coping mechanism, which are dangerous because of the situation they're in. So they are exposed to any, like, being easy recruits, for example, for the terrorist groups, in fact. And we have seen this in, like, the setting of the Syria war. Okay? Before coming to the UAE here 3 years ago, I was leading our operation in Jordan. We're providing food for around, food assistance for around 500,000 Syrian refugees there. In 2015, because us as an organization depends entirely on voluntary contribution, we simply ran out of funds. So the option we had at that time is to stop providing assistance to around 230,000 refugees, because we just concentrated on those who are severely vulnerable in there. But what happened? So they became easy recruit for ISIS. Or they crossed the Mediterranean. They took another dangerous risk, crossing the Mediterranean, going to Europe, in Germany, or the Nordic countries, and so on. So call that a coping mechanism. That's it. But the immediate mechanism that they come to play is reduce the number of foods, pull the children out of schools, do whatever other type of work that they may be able to perform to earn money to be able to put food on the table.
So we've, talked about that link between hunger and conflict, and you've just now given the example of Jordan and how hunger could perhaps exacerbate conflict and tensions as well. But let's talk about the flip side. In 2020, the Nobel Committee recognized the World Food Programme's work and awarded it the Nobel Peace Prize, and it specifically cited the WFP's role in, and I quote, making food security an instrument of peace. So can food security actually promote peace? How?
You said conflict leads to hunger, but hunger can also lead to conflict. So people now with the climate shocks, with the droughts that's becoming like every year in many parts of the world, there is scarcity of resources. So people start competing over the resources, which this is what ignites the conflict between them. We have seen, for example, or read some claim that or say that the war in Syria was actually ignited what ignited the war in Syria was the drought that happened in 2008, 2009, which pulled the rural population to come and put pressure on the urban setting. So we come in and we provide the food assistance. We help them also, help themselves. And this diffuses the conflict, and we maintain peace through that. So food security, of course, promotes security. And in any nation, you see, food security is a national security. So to maintain peace, to maintain, in a country, then the very first thing you need to do is maintain your food security. And this is what we do in many settings, and helped diffuse the situation in many parts of the world. And we are, of course, proud that we have been able to achieve this, and that's the recognition came through the award of the Nobel Peace Prize. And that award is actually not just for us, because we wouldn't have been able to do this by ourselves. We work with thousands of partners around the world, be it United Nations agencies, be it non-government organizations at national level or international level, be it our partners who also contribute to us financially, enabling us to reach this population. So it's a recognition for all those who work in this sector.
One of the things you said just now was about how food security, is intricately linked to peace as well. Would you say that's also one of the reasons why all of us in this room should care about conflict-driven hunger, even those of us who might be living in relative comfort and safety?
Yeah, I just gave you the example of the Syrian war. The Syrian war is not contained in Syria. So immediately after the war started, you have 500,000, 500,000 refugees crossed to Jordan. You have 1 million crossed to Lebanon. You have another 2 million crossed to Syria. This is just the neighboring country. So you can imagine also the host countries of these refugees, they felt the effect of the war. But it did not stop only there. It went also, it spread to Europe. Not the war, but the effect of the war. Spread to Germany, to Turkey, to Nordics. So today conflicts, they are protracted, but they spread at the same time. And of course, they cause disruption to the global markets, the global supply chain, and all this, and it affects all of us. So we are sitting far away from conflict, but somehow we will be affected. Yeah.
We have to end soon, but I have two quick questions actually before we end. What do we need to do to make sure that good food is available to everyone?
Look, the world today produces enough food to feed everybody in there, but equal access is not there. Okay, so we need first also the political will to that the world, all the world, come together and say we are going to end this. We are going to stop the conflict, which is the main cause of hunger. We need to look also at reform the supply chain system there, where people can have access to food. They can afford to have food on their tables. And we need also, like every day, we need to have new ideas. How do we come about this? We need to innovate. We need to adapt. So, and it's not just on us, on everybody to help us to do that, because it is something that ending hunger in 2030 is something doable. But there are prerequisites that need to be in place before we're able to do that.
Last question, in 10 seconds or less, if that's a challenge. If there's one message that you want people to take away from this chat, what is it? What do you want people to remember?
Remember that, yes, we are in different parts of the world. Access to food is easy, and as you said, we take it for granted that food is available. But we need to appreciate that. This is one thing we need to do, appreciate that. Second, we need to recognize how fragile we are. And we have seen from the COVID-19 experience how that brought the whole world to a standstill. So we need to recognize that we're fragile, we are vulnerable. Whenever we are hit with natural disasters or in a war zone and so on, we are like, it does not distinguish between rich and poor and all. It just hits all of us together. So remember that we are not immune to this.
Great. Thank you so much,
Thank
Majid,
you.
for being with us. And thank you all for listening. Back to you, Lorna.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Majid and Thin, for the stimulating conversation and for really delving deep into the most challenging conflict poses to ensuring healthy, nutritious food for the world's most vulnerable. These impossible choices are something many of us never have to think about, which makes this conversation even more important. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Africa is often marred by the narrative of conflict, such as the ones we've just heard about, and the devastating impacts of climate change, food security, as well as the cost of colonization. Yet Africa is also a continent of immense natural wealth and resources, and has crucial significance as we thrive to ensure good food for all. Now, Ndidi Nyuneli, expert of African agriculture and nutrition, philanthropy and social innovation, will speak to us about why West Africa has the possibility of turning its agricultural landscape and ecosystem into a powerful financial investment. The floor is yours, Ms. Nyuneli.
Good afternoon. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm sure many of you have seen these pictures. They have followed me around the world. I first saw these pictures when I was 16 and I moved to the US for college. My friends would say, "Did anyone ever tell you finish your dinner, there are starving children in Africa?" Or I'd walk off a stage, walk into a train station, and this actually happened after the Eat Forum. And I saw a picture like this in the train station. Donate to a cause, $10. Of course, it was, at that time, Swedish currency. But in the US, $10 infomercials. There are starving children in northern Uganda. These pictures made me angry. They broke my heart because I had grown up in southeastern Nigeria, and this was not my reality. We had enough to eat and enough to share. Now, this single story, as my friend Chimamanda Adichie says, is very dangerous. Yes, there is hunger, like we've heard. There's malnutrition, but it's a single story. It negates Africa's rich cultural heritage and connection with food. In fact, when you look at the food maps, rankings of food ecosystems around the world, you see Japanese cuisine ranked as number 1. It's healthy, sushi is well-loved. Most of us have never been to Japan, but we love sushi. And then you see an entire continent of 54 countries grouped as one and ranked really, really low. Or when you look at the food map and you see where food is placed, Africa is almost invisible. And yet we have some of the best food in the world. It's rich, it's diverse, it's healthy, it's nutritious, and it's tasty. Now, the amazing thing is that there's so much ignorance about African food. Some of the food we love and enjoy comes from Africa, and many of the birthplaces of most of the food that we actually are aware of comes from Africa. Our pulses, our fruits and vegetables, our nuts. 57% of the world's cashew is grown in West Africa, 70% of the world's cocoa. And even our sesame, when you have a hamburger or you have a bagel, is made from sesame grown on the continent. And as like my friend Ed Mbai says, if you've had a cup of coffee or Coca-Cola today, you have Africa to thank for it. Also, there's widespread global significance of our food, and the slave trade propagated this, where you look at Latin America, North America, even parts of Asia. African food influenced all these regions. And one example I love to share is okra. Some of you know this vegetable, okra. Well, do you know that the name okra is actually an Igbo word, okra? I happen to be Igbo. First cited in the colony of Virginia journals in the 1600s. Now, this was taken by slaves stolen from West Africa in their pockets, planted in the Americas. And the middle picture is actually seafood okra eaten in Nigeria today. And then gumbo eaten in Louisiana. Today, they're still extremely similar and identical. Just one example of how our food cultures have traveled and have influenced what we eat today. Now, we're changing this narrative. African entrepreneurs, like me and many others that you've heard of in this room, and others who are well represented across the continent, are demonstrating that Africa is an active player and an innovative player in our food ecosystem. And Africa can teach the world how to embrace healthy diets, because we have been eating these healthy diets for many years. When you think about our narrative, and you think about the Hadzipe people of Tanzania, one of the last untapped communities in our world, they eat 10 times more fiber than the average American. Their food is laden with vitamins and antioxidants, and we can learn from them when we think about protective foods and the future of the world's foods. But beyond that, we believe that Africa is naturally endowed for agricultural excellence, and that by knowing about our history, our contributions, and changing our narrative, celebrating our entrepreneurs, we can move the needle when it comes to transforming the ecosystem. So I started a new organization called Changing Narratives Africa. And it's focused on 3 things. One is amplifying our historical and current contributions to the global food ecosystem. 2 is by ensuring that our food is celebrated, acknowledged, and accepted around the world, and actually getting our food onto shelves globally. Not our commodities like we currently consume, but actually high-quality packaged food from the continent. And finally, building bridges through linkages and convenings. The first really is important to me because this mindset shift has to occur when it comes to media. A UCLA study looked at 700,000 hours of US programming. Africa was barely mentioned. When it was negative and grouped as a country and not a continent. So we believe that by telling positive stories about food from Africa, we can change mindsets. And one we already have on our website is called Crazy for Coffee Embraces Its Roots, which looks at how coffee was born in Ethiopia, is now grown by 18 countries in Africa, and we have some of the best varieties of coffee in the world, but also celebrates our entrepreneurs that are reclaiming our history and courage. The Africa and chocolates, we all love chocolates, but many of us don't know the connection between Africa and chocolates. And if we do, it's usually a negative connotation around, slave labor, child labor, not realizing that there are many amazing entrepreneurs in Africa today producing high-quality chocolates that are being sold on the continent and being sold around the world. And no one should tell you Africans don't like chocolates, because we do. And we are reclaiming our place in the chocolate industry. Similarly, no cola without West Africa kola nuts. Many of you know the history of kola nuts and how they formed the recipe for Coca-Cola. And today, many of our entrepreneurs are reclaiming the heritage with high-quality kola nut products that are 3 times more potent than coffee. Now, there are opportunities to double trade. Many people recognize that Africa's role in the global trade ecosystem has been diminished, but we are changing that. And through our Narrative Changes Food Fellowship, which we announced last year, we got 400 applications, and we selected 8 entrepreneurs that are ready and poised to get their products around the world. So some of our narrative changers are actually coming to Dubai this week and are going to be at the Nigeria Food Expo, who make fruits and coconut products and high-quality teas that are blended with sorrel and moringa and peppermint, leveraging nuts and plantains and spices and high-quality ukwa, which is just a superfood, which you're about to hear about. And we're expanding this to 15,000 entrepreneurs, partnering with Nourishing Africa, another organization that I founded that's a home for 1 million entrepreneurs. And this year alone, we're going to be helping 15,000 entrepreneurs get their food into the global food ecosystem. We expect impact, and everything I do is focused on impact. Because if we can get our foods on global shelves, we can not only create jobs on our continent, we can empower women, we can promote, build bridges, but we can also start changing your mindset so that when you eat a fantastically packaged product that's high quality, that's nutritious, that's tasty, that happens to be made in Nigeria, you say, wow, Nigerians have a lot to offer. I enjoy this food. So building bridges is critical. Now, what's my vision and what's our vision at Changing Narratives Africa? Our vision is simple. We want jollof rice to compete globally with sushi. Right? Nigerian jollof in particular. We want Senegalese ponyo to displace quinoa, and we want teff, which is from Ethiopia, gluten-free, nutritious, and healthy to displace white flour. And we believe that that is possible within our lifetime, and you can play a role, not only by purchasing Proudly African food, but if you don't have Proudly African food well packaged in your local supermarket, demand for it, ask for it, and ask the tough questions, and challenge the retailers in your community to support African food. I want to change the narrative so that when you think about poverty, you don't think of an African female farmer. You think of a successful entrepreneur from the African continent who is delivering impact, who is changing lives, who's generating wealth for herself and her families. Because there's a quote that I love, which says, what you don't have pride in, you can't value. And what you don't value, you can't cherish. And what you don't cherish, you can't preserve or develop. I have tremendous pride in African food. I believe all of us must cherish, embrace, and support this food ecosystem to really ensure that it's developed, it grows, and it creates jobs. So when you think about Africa, don't think of the hungry child. Think about these amazing young children who have a great future and a great hope because they're well-nourished, because they live in a safe environment. We've talked about the link between food and safety, and because they can go on to live productive and meaningful lives. Why don't you join me in this journey to change narratives about Africa? Thank you so much.
Absolutely powerful. Thank you so much, Ms. Nuneli, for your presentation and for highlighting why we must all think talk and approach food systems in Africa quite differently to other continents, and for sharing such an optimistic outlook into accelerating ambition and driving impact on this wonderful and important continent that is Africa. While she was on stage, I was going to ask her, who makes better jollof rice, Nigerians or Ghanaians? Anyone? Nigerians? Hands up. Mukhadi's lifting her hand. Ghanaians? Christian's lifting his hand. Absolutely amazing. I'm sure a lot of you are feeling a little bit tired, so should we just stand up and do like a little wave just so we can breathe and allow oxygen into our bodies? Don't worry, don't be shy. Just get up, do a little stretch. We're getting a lot of information today, which is really inspiring, and I'm sure you're all going to go back to your different countries and make a change. All right. Fantastic. Okay, moving right along. Now, building on what Ms. Nuneli has been sharing, we want to zoom into another pillar, namely good food powers people and economies. Before welcoming our next panel on stage, I'd like to first introduce another mentee poll to get us thinking about the role of global corporate companies in driving sustainable development. Please once again take out your smartphones and enter the code or scan the QR code you see on the screen. All right, very interesting. So people being first, and of course the second being planet, and prosperity being third. Thank you so much for helping us set the stage for this next exciting conversation. I'd like to welcome onto stage Anaita Dundi, chef and author, who will moderate this next conversation, Diane Holdorf, who's the Executive Vice President, Pathways, World Business Council for Sustainable Development. We have Yannick Foing, who will be joining us virtually, who's the Global Director, Nutrition Improvement at DSM. We've got Dr. Nigel Hughes, who's the Senior Vice President, Global Innovation and Research, as well as Development at Kellogg Company, and Wael Ismail, who's the Vice President, Corporate Affairs, and MENA at Pakistan at PepsiCo. They'll be discussing how global corporate companies designed for profitability and maximum market reach practically contribute to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. A big welcome to our moderator, Anaita Dundi, and the panelists.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Lorna, for such a warm welcome, and thank you to the Expo. We're at the Good Food for All flagship event, and we're going to be it's going to be quite an exciting panel. I'm going to keep this conversational. We've got two panelists here in person and two of them who've joined us virtually. Thank you and welcome to the panel. My name is Anaita Dundi. I am a chef and author from India, a country which is rich in food and culture. I have often thought and worked about how we can encourage biodiversity in our kitchens, and especially as a Parsi, how can I bring back cultural traditions and indigenous cooking practices?
I'm part of the Chef's Manifesto team. You can see my chef coat here. This chef coat actually has a story. It's made out of T-shirt scraps. It's designed in India, so it's the chef coat itself is zero waste. And the manifesto in the community, if you'd like to know a little bit about it, is a network of chefs from all over the world. We were 18 of us in Stockholm in 2018, and we're over 1,000 chefs from all over the globe, 90 countries. And to know more about us, you can visit the website and obviously follow us on social media and on Instagram. It's extremely exciting that the Expo has helped forward this chef movement by translating the Chef's Manifesto into Arabic. When you translate it into a local language, you get more and more people involved. And during the Global Goals Week earlier this year, it happened. We've got some exciting projects in the pipeline this year for our network. So let's turn towards our topic today, which is the role and practical actions global companies can take to contribute to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm so thrilled to be talking to our panelists, and our MC, Chef Lorna, has already given the introduction, so I am just going to dive right in. MNCs, or multinational corporations, are often viewed in a negative light when it comes to food system transformations. As large corporations with huge amounts of resources, you have a human and planetary obligation to be actively leading the way on positive changes for our food systems. I know all the three companies represented by all of you panelists today are doing phenomenal work on helping us achieve the 2030 agenda. So let's unpack these challenges and let's get focused on what all of us are doing here. So the first question I have is for Diane, who's joined us virtually. Diane, you've worked for a big company and you're now working at WBCSD, which works with companies across the sector. Could you talk about some of the ways you're seeing companies step up to the challenges we're facing today?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And it's so great to see all of you. Wonderful to be able to be with you today, even though it's virtually. We see so many examples all the time of companies who are doing quite amazing things through their innovation, through their technology solutions. And at WBCSD, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, we're working with companies like Kellogg, Pepsi, and DSM, all of whom are here with me today, to look at what the collective action is. What is it that we need to do together to really accelerate these transformations, these changes that we're talking about? I think Ndidi just did a great job showing where so much innovation is occurring in places that aren't necessarily led by multinationals, but as we look at the value chains that are national, that are global, we see that there's big opportunities around engaging producers and farmers more closely into that equitable distribution of value. We see a lot of opportunity as we look at soil health, at biodiversity on farm, all the way through to these distribution channels, into the innovation that we look at for our portfolios and the shifts in our foods. Last year was actually quite a milestone year for the food system. It was the first time ever that the United Nations put together a collective food systems summit. And we saw huge momentum building as a result of that. This year, our opportunity is to keep that going through many of the coalitions of action that we saw, and use that momentum with the types of examples that we're seeing companies lead with to drive some of that change. We saw amazing things like the Demand Generation Alliance coming forward for nutritious and sustainable foods. That was a great partnership example with GAIN, with EAT and Gunhild, who I knew speak earlier today, World Food Programs, CGF, WBCSD, and other key stakeholders with big companies as part of that, saying here's what we need to do to really emphasize the role of consumer demand for food system change, in addition to, of course, the role that we play going all the way back to farm. So I know we're going to have a great conversation. With that, I will pass it back to you, and I really look forward to the continued conversation in our panel here today.
Thank you so much, Diane, and thank you, obviously, for joining us virtually. We've also got Yannick with us on the panel. He's also joined us virtually. And an interesting thing about how I met Yannick earlier in 2021 is when we started working on fortification. And as a chef, and I'm sure in the audience, a lot of us might not know what fortification means, and till not, a couple of months back, I wasn't really clear about what fortification is, and how is it that companies like DSM are actually reaching out to a large audience. So Yannick, I have a question for you, and obviously this is a strong focus on what you guys are doing at DSM. So tell us a little bit about the area of fortification, and tell us a little bit about how it's become a key tool in development for you at DSM, and what can we learn from that?
We're happy to. Thanks, Anahita, and thanks to the organizer to having me today. Apologize, Anahita, because it's a missed opportunity again to meet in person, but hopefully next time. So let me start by raising a point. I mean, what does good food mean? And I think NDD alluded to that earlier. So tasty, sustainably produced, aspirational, and affordable for sure. But good food should also be obviously nutritious, right? And because of the pandemic, I mean, we've seen a significant increase of the consumption of staple food, mainly because of budget reasons, and staple food represents exactly what it says. It's the most essential basic food available on everyone's plate, right? And right now, in the case of the billions of people living, for most of them, in the lower part of the socioeconomic pyramid, that's pretty much the one food that they can rely on having on their plate when nothing else is available. So even though such food may contain sufficient calories to give you the energy you need to get going on a daily basis, they lack the crucial vitamins and minerals that you need, especially during a pandemic times. And now we have over 2 billion people globally who are suffering from macronutrient deficiencies, which are intimately connected to anemia, neurological defects, stunting, and eventually economic development as well, right? So the intervention of fortifying staple foods like maize or wheat-based meals, rice or edible oil with essential nutrients is pretty much a very good, inexpensive and efficient way to increase the nutrient content of food that people consume every day. And if it's done properly, it really has the potential to helping to make a more nutritious diet affordable and available to all. And it's also a very cost-effective intervention. So there are different estimates, but typically every dollar invested in food fortification generates $27 on average in economic return from averted diseases, improved earnings, and also improved work productivity. It's highly accepted, and it does not impact taste or change the diet habits. So honestly, if you ask me, it's really a game-changer intervention, and we have not tapped yet the full potential of food fortification. And just before you ask me about the question about the cost of fortification, the incremental cost per person per year for fortifying flour, for instance, with iron and folic acid is only 12 cents. 12 cents per year per person. So when you look at the benefits, so fortification should not be seen as a cost, it should be seen really as an investment for the future. So over to you, Anahita.
Yes. So actually, just for the audience here, I had my inhibitions as well as a chef to use fortified rice, and I actually tried the DSM fortified rice, and it looks the same, it tastes the same, it just has micronutrients which you possibly wouldn't be able to get into your diet. And coming back to you, Yannick, and a country like India, which has got chronic micronutrient deficiency, is there anything that you are doing with school meal plans or with children? Because I think that is where you really want to get fortified grains and fortified rice. That's where you want to do your bit. So what's happening in that area?
Yeah, it's a great question, Anahita. And indeed, I mean, school meals in India, but also globally, they constitute probably the most reliable daily sources of food for children, right? And these school meal programs make a tremendous contribution to the daily nutrient intake of children. And this is not an issue that we see only in low to middle income countries, right? But also in Europe, in the US as well. And I think in the US, the government helps feed over 30 million school kids a day, which is about 1 in 2, right? So school feeding is indeed a great way to fill the nutrients gap of children and to boost their immune system. But we need to ensure that we move from feeding them only to nourishing them. So the school meals need to be, I think, diverse, definitely, but also they need to contain the necessary level of nutrients so that they can unlock their full potential. And if you look at a country like India, where fortified rice is now available in many states through the different school feeding programs, we already start seeing a positive impact. impact on cognition, impact on kids feeling healthier, more energetic, and so on. So it's definitely a critical intervention. But it should be expanded globally, and we are now seeing a global momentum for school feeding around the School Meal Coalition, led by organizations like the World Food Programme, for instance. So working closely with many, many partners to ensure that fortified staples are being made available to children through school meal is definitely something that would be very high on the agenda of every organization.
Thank you so much, and I'm sure that was very informative for all of us here. I have got Nigel, who is, he's at this company which all of us know. I mean, Kellogg's, we've all grown up with eating cereals and cornflakes. I mean, my personal favorite has been Chocos, and I mean, that's just something
it's not a bad thing.
I know it's not. And I mean, I can eat it straight out of the box. So definitely one of the household names, we've all grown up eating it. So I want to know from you, Nigel, that can you give us any insights into the work that Kellogg's doing, working especially with farmers to promote regenerative farming?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you only need to go to Battle Creek, Michigan, which is the Kellogg headquarters and where Kellogg was founded, to understand that the company started with the connection with the farmer. You're in the Midwest, that's where wheat is grown, and that was the very, very beginning of the company. And that heritage is really carried through the company over the last 80 years, 100 years. We currently have programs with 400,000 farmers around the world. Our plan is to double those programs by 2030 to 1 million farmers. And all those numbers sound very big, but I just want to tell you 3 quick stories. One about rice, one about sultanas, and one about potatoes. So the rice story, we have a program called the In-Grain program, which we've very, very recently initiated. This is working with rice farmers in North America, in the Mississippi Delta, to actually drive exactly what you say, regenerative farming and conservative water use in order to decrease greenhouse gas emissions. A couple of things about that program. The first is, there was talk earlier about what do you need financially to do to make these impacts. First thing is, we are paying the farmers more for these practices, for rice produced with these practices. The second thing is, we are supporting them with learning programs so that they aggregate. The third thing is, we are working with them to have common measures, so everybody understands and can track these things. The other beautiful thing about it is, this is a woman-led enterprise as well, so that's a really nice thing.
That's a great one. Round of applause, please. That's a great one.
Sultanas, very quickly. You might think of Kellogg as a grain company, but actually we use a lot of fruit in what we do. Sultanas, huge numbers of sultanas are produced in Turkey. They're actually farmed by migrant workers. And obviously we know one of the problems that can arise with migrant workers is they come along with their families, they're moving across the country, picking and processing. During the harvesting period, kids don't get educated. Kids even get drawn into the farming process. So we're working with 8 of the leading sultana producers to ensure that they are applying the right practices for those pickers and processors, ensuring their kids go to school, all of these labor practices. And then the third one is potatoes. In terms of potatoes, we make Pringles. A lot of people don't realize that Kellogg make Pringles. We actually use 75% of otherwise rejected potatoes to make Pringles. Potatoes that are misformed and would normally be rejected from the food system. And so that's bringing a whole lot of those into the food system and ensuring that we don't have high levels of food wastage. So there's just 3 examples of the work we're doing.
Thank you so much, Nigel. I am going to come back to you with another question in a bit, but we've also got with us Wael, who is from PepsiCo, and I think all of us know about this huge brand, PepsiCo. It's present in all our countries. We've all, had a couple of products from there, but we might not know the entire portfolio, which I think a lot of us are not aware about. So if you can tell me about the portfolio of your products and also about the huge farms that you guys have all over the world, especially with growing potatoes, if I'm not wrong. Tell us about that work and how you promote diverse diets that PepsiCo is involved in.
Sure. Thank you so much, Chef. I think it's great being here to talk about this topic. I mean, as PepsiCo, we've been partners with Expo, to showcase a new future of how people can engage and consume food. So you see, we've put still water in cans. You see it Aquafina cans. You have the stations. We have some bites and compostable packaging here in Expo, and we're really proud of being partners as well with the Agro Week this week. So, the name on the door, of course, is PepsiCo. So Pepsi is what people usually associate it with, the beverages, but we have a huge hydration portfolio, whether it's hydration as in Aquafina or in sports drinks like, Gatorade. On the foods, we're very proud of Lay's across, the world, but especially in our region, in Africa, Middle East, and South Asia. Local brands in Saudi, for example, such as Tasali, in Egypt, Chipsy, Quaker. So we really, as you said, touch people's lives across the range. So, and I think a lot of consumers enjoy our products from indulgence to, the good-for-you brands, etc. And I think that is, you saw the previous speaker. I think when you talk about sustainability or engaging people, I think nothing really brings more pride than agriculture. I think you can see it in the earlier session with the chefs, with youth and agriculture, etc. So people really take very deep pride in it, and we also take that because at the essence we are an agricultural company. So we work with hundreds of farmers within our sector, within Africa, Middle East, South Asia, but also globally, and we really engage them in India, in Pakistan, in Egypt. We've launched programs such as She Feeds the World, so working with women farmers, giving them practices that would make them run their businesses in a much more effective way and driving also enhanced yields for us. So we end up using those same potatoes that go into the products. South Africa, and in Africa we have similar programs. And everywhere in our sector, that is something that we're really proud of. WFP, we're here today, and we're really proud of the partnerships that we have with them as well. So this year we're launching 2 programs, one in Iraq, one in Libya, to talk about regenerative agriculture, enhancing people's livelihoods, etc. So our goal is to really be part of that story, that people want to be proud of the work that they do, enhance those communities, and work with them much, much more closely. And really giving these types of conversations and dialogues to really drive that conversation to a much more sustainable food system. So happy to answer any more questions, but we're really proud of the work that we do, and happy to be here, of course, at Expo.
I have one question, and I'm sure everyone would like to know. We do see, a lot of brands changing their packaging. I think it has to do with the amount of plastic that's used. So as a brand like PepsiCo, I know you guys are shifting to a lot of sustainable practices, and you have been doing that as well. But there is this huge question about plastic bottles and plastic waste. What is your plan, and what's happening there?
Sure. So I think just to take one step back, and I'll quickly address your point, is that last year we launched what we call PepsiCo Positive, or Pep Plus, which is really our end-to-end transformation journey. So we started this journey, I would say, probably around 15 years ago. We used to call it Performance with Purpose. We enhanced it with Winning with Purpose, and now we've put really PepsiCo Positive at the heart of what we do. There is the pillar of positive value chain within that larger strategy. And in it, we really are looking to drive the circular economy of how to really make sure that we really reduce our plastics footprint. And to do so, we have a lot of metrics around it. But fundamentally is what you see here today. So you see we're trying to minimize the use of plastics. We have the Aquafina stations that has helped Expo really drive a lot of reduction in plastics use. So it's not just about reducing the type of packaging, but also really envisioning a new way of consuming these products. So it's not just about the packaging, it's how people are engaging with their brands. So that's, I think, one element which is driven innovation. We're going to launch, hopefully, or announce in the next couple of days, we've launched the Greenhouse Accelerator Program, which is an incubator to look at startups to really enhance that infrastructure for packaging and recycling, specifically for the Middle East, in partnership with the Ministry of Climate Change. And we're going to have 10 exciting partnerships with startups to help us really look at that future, because at PepsiCo, we can't really do it alone. And I think the third one, very quickly, is how can we drive collection and recycling campaigns across where we work, but also really commit to using recycled plastic in our packaging and make sure that we are able to scale it in this part of the world. Unlike Europe, and parts of the US, where that perception of recycled plastic is there, awareness is there. Here we have to also take our consumers with us in this journey. So that's something that we're really committed to, Chef.
Thank you so much. Just a quick question for you, Nigel. I know you're doing some exciting work in innovation and R&D.
Yes.
A quick story about something that's going to be really exciting for the audience and for us, and we're looking forward to it.
I'll absolutely tell you a quick story, but I'm going to make one quick comment before.
Sure.
It's fascinating to me that the conversation flipped to products away from food.
Yes.
And we make food. I think it's really important that we stick with that. Anyway, now a food story, a quick food story. In Latin America, I'm really excited about some work we're doing. What we're doing is to work on accessible snacks, but accessible snacks that actually increase the micronutrient absorption, what we heard about from our friend and colleague in DSM, improving that, but also working with mothers to actually educate on the fiber content of those foods and therefore the way in which they improve microabsorption. Because in the end, and I've loved the theme of this whole morning, we all learn the way we eat from our mothers and from the table.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I'm glad you said that, Nigel, because food is love, and that's how the conversation started this morning. We just have about 5 minutes, so I want to open this up to our audience. There are some rules, and I'm just going to tell you that please keep your mask on when you have to ask a question. Please stand up, keep it short, and keep it to just one question, please. State your name and where you're from. So if you have any questions, please do raise your hands, and we'll try and answer them. So I don't think we have a question, which is, oh, we do. Thank you so much.
Hi everybody. I'm DJ Forza. I'm with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and my question is for Yannick. How can we incentivize more public-private collaboration to advance food systems transformation? Thank you.
So the question is for you, Yannick. Do you want us to repeat the question? Okay, I don't think we can hear Yannick.
Can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you now.
Okay, great, perfect. Would you mind repeating quickly the question?
Can you please repeat your question?
Sorry, thank you.
Otherwise, I can ask the question again.
Hi, oh, keep it on? Okay, sorry. Hi, Yannick. Can you please talk a little bit about how we can further incentivize public-private collaboration to accelerate food systems transformation? Thank you.
Thanks. So that's a great question indeed. And at the end of the day, I mean, one sector cannot do it alone, right? And I think every sector, whether it's product sector, the United Nations, government, donors, we all have a clear role to play here. I think we have a couple of interesting and successful PPPs, public-private partnerships, that we can indeed highlight. And I think WBCSD has been doing a great job spearheading and supporting companies like the one involved today, and making sure that the success stories are known. So going back to your question, I think my take would be we need to show what worked and what didn't work, learn from our mistakes, and make sure that we show to the different organizations that getting involved in a public-private partnership will result in a win-win-win collaboration for everyone, and eventually for the consumers and the beneficiaries. If you take, for example, the partnership that DSM has with World Food Programme since 2007, it's one, I think, of the longest-standing PPP that exists. It contributed to improving the food basket of WSP tremendously. We reached last year over 35 million beneficiaries with improved nutrition, for instance. So I think my point is really, if you want to take this further, we need more PPPs for sure, because that will help us to reach scale, but we need to ensure that we share more of the success stories. Like the one we heard from Kellogg and PepsiCo earlier. Did you guys know what Kellogg and PepsiCo are doing in this space? So every sector needs to be more open, communicate on what we are doing well. And I don't think the private sector is knowing enough of that. So.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your question, and thank you to all the panelists. And let's not forget that good food is for all. We've all got a role to play, right from big corporates to chefs here and all of us in the audience as well. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand over to Lorna. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you for your insight and reflections. It really feels like our discussions, though rich in complexities, is driving forward action for good food for all. Now, as good food powers people and economies, it also makes progress possible, from the enormous potential to mitigate the damaging effects of climate change to increasing the nutritional content of our food and improve food security. But how do we practically work to achieve this? Now, Tony Rinaldo, an agronomist, Principal Natural Resources Advisor at World Vision Australia, and known famously as the Forest Maker, who has been instrumental in transforming thousands of hectares of land through farmer management, natural regeneration, is joining us virtually today to share his thoughts on this difficult question. Tony, are you there with us?
Yes, hello Lorna.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
What time is it in Melbourne?
About 9:15 p.m.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Please have the floor.
Thank you, and greetings, everybody. It's a great honor and a pleasure to be with you and share tonight. Regenerative agriculture supports food and livelihood needs of the present and future generations while helping people to both cope with and combat climate change. Regenerative agriculture covers a range of techniques that are used alone or in combination, and it's a conservation and rehabilitation approach to farming, and it focuses on topsoil regeneration through minimal soil disturbance and in keeping the soil covered for as much of the time as possible. Specific practices include agroforestry, which is the combination of trees and crops, or trees and pasture. Holistic grazing management, an approach to grazing and decision-making that actually uses livestock to restore the soil and the vegetation. Regenerative agriculture practices tend to increase biodiversity of both productive plants and animals, but also of non-agricultural plants and animals as well. Another example is water harvesting. So because regenerative agricultural practices increase water infiltration and retention in soils, it minimizes the negative impacts of both too much rain and too little rain. Conservation agriculture, organic farming, and many other approaches as well are included in this umbrella of regenerative agriculture. As biodiversity and soil organic matter increases, the free services that nature offers also increase. These include increasing soil fertility, a favorable microclimate that's favorable for crop growth, pollination services by insects, and also pest control. All of these things increase as the biodiversity and organic matter increases. My work involves the global promotion of a reforestation technique called farmer-managed natural regeneration, and you can see a definition there on the screen. It's a technique that regenerates trees and shrubs from existing tree stumps, sometimes from roots in the ground that have the ability to resprout, and very often from seed that's still in the ground. And it's very rapid, very low cost, and it's scalable. The approach is also a development approach for mobilizing and empowering local communities to restore their farmland and the wider environment. In Niger Republic, West Africa, one of the world's poorest countries, treeless, degraded landscapes in the 1970s would have been transformed across more than 6 million hectares And today they're supporting over 240 million trees. Lands that supported less than 4 trees per hectare in the late 70s today have an average of over 40 trees per hectare. And this has had a very big impact on the livelihoods and the nutritional status of the communities. Because of this restoration, gross income of over 4.5 million Nigerian farmers has increased by up to $1,000 across the country, totaling about $900 million every year. And these farmers are growing an additional 500,000 tons of grain, enough to feed 2.5 million people every year, by virtue of the fact that they've restored the tree cover on their farmland and it's created better soil conditions and a better microclimate. And all this was done without government or non-government organisation support, or I must say minimal support, and without subsidies or enforcement. So this work is very significant, as it's helping millions of the world's poorest farmers to double crop yields. It's reduced the impact of flooding and the impact of droughts. It's helped to generate alternative income streams. It's provided fuel wood in countries where women were walking up to 4 hours every second day just to collect fuel wood. Building timber, diverse nutritious foods, fodder, and traditional medicine. So it's had a very, very big impact across many countries. In addition, FMNR addresses issues of land degradation, desertification, and biodiversity loss, while drawing down millions of tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So in this graph, it represents the drawdown from one project in Ethiopia. It's a 2,700 hectare forestry project. In a 10-year period, 110 tons of carbon dioxide was sequestered, was drawn down and absorbed by those trees. Two ways in which trees help communities adapt are through improving the water cycle and through decreasing temperatures. In this slide, you can see the crop is not only surviving close to the trees, it's actually thriving. And this photo was taken in an extreme drought year. And what's happening is effectively the tree is bio-irrigating the crop. With its tap roots, it's drawing up water from deep in the soil profile. And at nighttime, some of that moisture leaks through shallow roots within reach of the crop roots, effectively irrigating them. When trees drop leaves onto the soil, it helps to build up organic matter. A 1% increase in organic matter across 1 hectare helps that land to hold an additional 144,000 litres of water. And much of that water is available to the crops. So trees on landscapes have a very big impact on the water cycle. Temperatures. Every 1 degree increase in temperature above about 35 degrees Celsius, crop yields will decrease by about 10%. And with climate change, temperatures are set to rise by even in excess of 5 degrees in some regions. Above 35 degrees, livestock reduce their food intake. So this means less meat, less milk, wool, eggs, and so on. So temperatures are critical to the success of agriculture. And yet a light covering of trees across a landscape will increase yields by 50 to 70%. And you can see here this photo from Mali in West Africa, taken at midday. Air temperatures are 10 degrees cooler under the tree, and soil surface temperatures were 35 degrees cooler. That can mean the difference between success or failure of a farmer's crop. In regenerative agriculture strongly connects to food in terms of land, income, and livelihoods. In southwest Ethiopia, communities suffered greatly because of land degradation. In 1984, there was a severe drought and subsequent famine. And each year, even beyond 1984, each year thousands of farmers during the dry season would move to the capital cities looking for work and food to send back home. The region continued to experience periodic periods of hunger as well. In 2006, we initiated the Humbo Community Managed Natural Regeneration Project on these 2,700 hectares of degraded forest. Within just 6 years of initiating this project, this historically food aid dependent community sold 106 tons of grain to the World Food Programme. So tremendous impact on the soil fertility, on the microclimate, and on the buffering against both extremes of too much rain and too little rain. At the same time, biodiversity increased. And so it made possible a totally new income stream through ecotourism. Farm enterprises diversified, including beekeeping, fodder production, fattening of livestock. And you can see the grain store in the photo on the left there. Even when droughts occur, people have produced a surplus and they're able to buffer against shortages of food. Beyond restoring soil, vegetation, food security, and livelihoods, the biggest change that I see when I have the opportunity to go back into these communities is the restoration of hope. People who felt like hopeless victims of climate change and poverty now have hope. And they realize that by working with nature instead of fighting it and destroying it, they can create the future that they want for themselves and their future. And as I thought about this presentation, I think regenerative agriculture is also about hope. Deforestation, land degradation, malnutrition, poverty are not inevitable. How and where we farm, what we buy, what we consume can either destroy the environment and our future or restore the environment and offer a bright future for all. The choice is ours. Thank you, Lorna.
Fantastic. Tony, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Australia and giving us so much insight and that amazing presentation. Now,
my pleasure. Thank you.
Fantastic. Now, let us take a moment to take stock on where we stand in today's program. We've established both challenges and opportunities in our path towards good food for all, highlighted the absolutely crucial role of farmers, the enormous potential of Africa in this equation, considered the role and responsibilities of big corporations in the transformation of food systems, and delved deep into how good food can drive progress and power people and economies. What we now need to look at is how to accelerate ambition and drive impact on our way towards good food for all. And essential to any conversation about accelerating ambition and impact is knowing the tools that are required to enact lasting change. Now, bringing together amazing panelists from the areas of research, philanthropy, and investment is Paul Newman, joining us today to moderate a conversation between Etherin Cousin, who's former Executive Director for World Food Programme, founder and CEO of Food Systems for the Future, as well as Enoch Chikava, Interim Director, Agricultural Development at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and Dr. Claudia Sadoff, Managing Director, Research Delivery and Impact at CGIAR. Everyone, please put your hands together in welcoming our moderator, Paul, and the panelists onto the stage as they take on this very important topic on good food for all, the tools needed to drive impact.
Well, I am excited. Thank you so much, Lorna, and this conversation today has been absolutely amazing. To accelerate ambition and to drive impact to achieve good food for all, we need multipliers. We need things that offer ways for us to move faster. We no longer have the time to just take things one at a time. We have multiple challenges that we need to address all at once. There's a number of people in the world that are going hungry, that are not getting the right nutrition, that are not having the ability to have good food for all, is increasing in many areas. And so we need to increase our ambition and our effort. And I feel that research, philanthropy, and investment can be tools that can make the difference. They can be the game changers. And I'm so excited to welcome 3 fantastic panelists to discuss these important questions with me. The conversation that was happening actually just backstage was amazing, and we're going to hope that we can kind of pick that up. It's going to be exciting. But before we dive in, I want to ask you, we're going to do one more Mentimeter. So I'm going to ask you about what tools do you think are most important. We're going to have a look at some different options: research, innovation, technology, investments, political will, or something else. There's always a something else, because there's always opportunity. There's always ways for us to do it. So have a look, go to Menti, let's see what we get. Always great to hear from everyone. Looks like political will seems to be fairly popular, but investments are jumping up. Interesting. Well, thank you for putting that in. I think there'll probably be a couple more numbers, but it's interesting to see political will is really coming up as one of the key ways in which to drive change. So what I'm going to do as we kind of start this panel, and it's so exciting to have the 3 of you with us today, I'm just going to ask you in a kind of quick fire, what stood out to you today from the conversation in particular? And as we start 2022, what do you think is the most important element, in your opinion, to drive greater impact? And we'll start with you, Claudia.
Thanks so much, Paul. It is great to be here with everyone today. And this conversation has been tremendous, coming from so many different perspectives and with such depth of lived and felt experience from all of the speakers. It's really been just a phenomenal pleasure to watch. And I was really struck, actually, by the first Mentimeter that said, where do we begin? And it overwhelmingly said we begin with farmers. And that was followed by the conversation with farmers that really spoke to these very lived experiences. And I was so struck by the moderator Cherry's story of how she read a book when she was 11 that inspired her to inspire change. And so I feel what really stands out for me is it's these ideas, it's these solutions that inspire people. To my mind, it's what would inspire political will. It's what would inspire investment, is when we have tangible, understandable, implementable, proven solutions that people then stand up and act. They can be inspired by a young woman. She's not an average young woman by any means, but it's those ideas, it's those solutions. And what was also so interesting about her example was she was speaking to cane farmers about planting vegetables. She wasn't talking about doing their narrow thing better. She was talking about changing the system of production, diversifying, learning new skills, new solutions to help with a more resilient, more nutritionally secure, more livelihood secure space. And I think that was such a great story for framing so much about what we're talking about here. So to my mind, the key element, and this isn't surprising as I'm associated with a significant research and development and research and innovation organization, is the power of real solutions and the importance of research and development in inspiring that will and inspiring that investment, because the change that we need to see, we've been hearing this very clearly, is quite fundamental, requires so many different partners, scientists, farmers, private sector entrepreneurs, educators, policymakers, politicians. And what we're looking at transforming is so fundamental. So this is our basic needs. This is our food supply. We can't take undue risk, right? It's agriculture, which is the employer of the poor. We can't take undue risk. We need sound research and innovation, investment and understanding to provide the solutions that will take us strongly into the transformation that we want to see. We're seeing so much here today about what it is we want our food systems to be able to do for us. How do we get there wisely? How do we get there in a way that not only provides food and nutrition security, but also provides what we've heard, sustainability, diminished greenhouse gas emissions, right? Greater climate resilience, greater equity and inclusion. All of these issues are solution space that we really need to understand more fully and then act on.
Absolutely. And I mean, I love what you were talking about there, just in terms of the connection. And I mean, the Sustainable Development Goals are built around this relationship between these issues. And I think you've really brought that out in such a beautiful way, and the farming stories and how that drives forward. Enoch, coming to you, what are your reflections?
I mean, firstly, I'm sure it is where we are having the meeting here in Dubai, which is the connector between Africa and South Asia. So that is very important for me. The times we talk about this confluence of calamities, which is climate, COVID, conflict, which we all talked about today. But at times when you are discussing at a global level, you miss the nuances and the realities of what that means. So I would say three things stood, very prominently for me. Firstly, when we talk about smallholder farmers, we don't do that with sufficient knowledge at times. and I'm smiling because I grew up on a smallholder farm, and I spent the entirety of my career working with smallholder farmers. And now I have a wonderful privilege of also leading now a global organization whose main focus is actually the smallholder farmers. Because there are three important things why that is very, very important. Number one, as you know, they produce 80% of food which is consumed in the urban areas. And that's about 2 billion people they help to feed. Secondly, smallholder agriculture is a job. It's not a hobby. It's not something that you do because, I need to find something to do, It is a job. It is providing income for school fees, for health care, everything that we care about. It is coming from this small piece of land. Thirdly, the economies are actually powered by agriculture. As you know, 30% of the GDP in Africa is driven by agriculture, and agriculture is smallholder agriculture. And then more than 50% of the people are employed, which is now the employment issue. So it's not just, I know we've been talking here about cuisines from different places and so on, but when you talk about Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia, smallholder agriculture is the center of everything. Political will, that's why political will stood out. Because you, as a global organization, we can't care about poor people than the leaders themselves. And that is why at the Gates Foundation, we have a vision of what we call country-led inclusive agricultural transformation, which means it must be led by the people. It must be led by the leaders. And our role is to make sure that we are helping them with the tools. And again, I'm glad we'll be talking in detail here about what are those tools that will accelerate progress at global level, at regional level, as well as local level.
That's amazing. And it's great to have that experience, to know that story from a smallholder farmer perspective. And I think sometimes we can talk about these issues, but it's also to really hear from. And it's been really great to hear those stories, but then also be able to take that forward into really driving the right focus as we go forward in driving impact. Earthrin, please.
Well, thank you. And first of all, let me appreciate you for organizing this conversation today, which has been amazing. Let's give Paul a round of applause.
Thank you.
Amazing. And I can tell you, we started this conversation on my couch about 6 months ago,
yes.
4 months ago, and you had this vision of what today would look like, and bravo to you. Now to your question, what about today? What made me really excited about today is exactly what you heard from the other two panelists. It wasn't us from Chicago or from Gates or from CGIAR saying what needed to happen. We heard from the people performing the work, leading the efforts in their communities about the successes that they are driving in those communities. And that is a new conversation. Because for so long, it was donor-directed, not country-driven. It's still a lot donor-directed. Let's not pretend that the donors still don't have a hand in what the countries deliver and what the countries drive. But at the same time, there's at least more of a conversation going on now. We talked about localization in the 2017 Humanitarian Conference. And everyone embraced the idea, but no one funded it. And so when you see leaders starting at young ages, delivering and developing programs, delivering those programs successfully, making the change, not waiting for localization to take hold, and defining what localization can mean, we're winning. Gun Hill started by talking about it's all about love. Food systems transformation is about ensuring that love is equitable across the globe, and that love is driven by opportunity. And so that was what we saw today, and why I am so excited about everything that is happening in so many different communities. I say to people all the time, I have more of my career behind me than ahead of me. So it is really fantastic to see all these young people on the stage, because then I can go sit down someplace and know that they will carry on and carry forward.
Earthrin, we had a great conversation on that couch, and I'm reminded now your energy is amazing, and I don't want you to go and sit on that couch. I want you to keep coming and stepping forward. I would love for you to just tell us, like, what role do you see? I know you've been talking, we had a bit of a conversation on this, about finance and investment. And why is finance and investment important in accelerating change?
Because you can't get anything done without the money. And the reality of it is, we have all kinds of incubators, accelerators, X Prizes, grants coming online every single day to start new businesses, to support the transition of the food system by energizing the development of new tools. But there's no capital for growth. Whether you call it the missing middle, the hidden middle, the messy middle, that space between startup and commercial attraction of capital is the space that stops opportunity. And if we want to see transitions of the food system beyond just small projects and programs that lack resilience, that don't build jobs, that don't build economic opportunity, then let's not solve the problem of the messy middle.
Yeah.
But if we can solve the problem of the messy middle, then we can move beyond just projects that are grant dependent, philanthropy dependent. Now, we need philanthropy because what we need to do is build capital stacks that are blended capital, that have concessionary capital to overcome the traditional lens of risk that limits equity, more traditional equity capital, VC capital, and, from coming in. And if we can have a blended capital stack to bring real dollars that provide the opportunity to grow businesses, then we're talking about making the kind of sustainable change in the creating the transition of the food system that we all agreed was necessary last year at the UN Food System Summit, from farm to fork, that will not just be about, yes, we need to increase production of farmers, but we also need to increase logistics support. We need to increase refrigeration. We need to increase warehousing and wholesaling and retailing opportunities. We need to increase recycling opportunities. All of those require capital and different kinds of capital that are in the space today.
Thanks, Earthrin. And I saw, Enoch, you nodding and agreeing with some of this. You work for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Can you just talk to us a little bit about some of the priorities you see as game changers, as how you, as the foundation, are supporting transformation and to kind of really see this change that we're talking about today?
I mean, one of the observations that we've made in the past few years is that the countries that have really used agriculture as the engine for economic growth and wealth creation, by again understanding that, you know, small agriculture is about jobs, it is about the economy. Find that you need to invest for the long haul. You can't projectize development. It is a long haul. You need to have leadership with foresight. And here we are talking about 20, 30 years of committed investment. We have realized that if a country is spending, let's say, 10% of its national budget towards agriculture, which, you know, this is what the CADEP is also saying, and they're able to grow their agricultural sector by at least 6% per annum. And they're spending an extra 3% in infrastructure, rural infrastructure like roads, irrigation. Then that is the engine that will drive progress. And here you get other donors, you are borrowing money, but you are planning for yourself. So this, we have seen countries that have done that, Ethiopia, as you know, Ghana, you go to Rwanda. You find that behind the progress, there is the vision, there is the plan that is prioritized. And then you're bringing others along to help you, not to let your country be run by people who say this is what you need. So that is fundamental. So what's our role in that? So we have realized for many years that research and development and innovation are critical tools. And you can do that at research level, you can do that at policy level, you can do that at farmer-facing services. And right now we are living at a better time than most countries. As you know, our transformation took place some time back in 90 years ago in Europe and the US, and most recently in China. We are living at a better time when we can use data science, machine learning, to understand more about what's going on. Last year, we had what is called the Ceres 2030, which is a group of scientists. They looked into the literature of saying what is informing what we are researching on. And they looked about 100,000 different articles. And they discovered that 2% was actually informed by deep understanding of the smallholder agriculture. So again, here you can talk about spillovers, You develop an innovation in Europe or the US, and you think it will spill over and then begin to affect Africa. It doesn't happen that way. It has to happen within the environment. As you know, I'm sure Claudia will expound more here. There's what you call the G by E, by management.
Yeah.
You need to understand what is happening at the farm level. So in the past, I'll just give you maybe a few examples here which are starting to be transformational.
Yeah.
We worked with partners and came up with what we call the digital soil map. And normally, smallholder farmers won't understand much about their own soil because it is very costly. The conventional way is that you take samples and then you send them to London, they get analyzed, they come back. That costs you $103.
Wow.
For you to get a sample, analyze it, get back the results. And for you to be able to do that at a sufficient scale to know, what is the quality of your 1 acre is so costly. So again, working with partners using data science, machine learning, we managed to reduce that cost from $103 per sample to $3.
Oh, wow.
Which means that every country now can map digitally. They will know in real time what is the quality of their soil. And that's very important under conditions of climate change.
Yeah.
Because again, the future is no longer where it used to be, Things are changing. So you are now going to be informed in terms, what do I plant next year or the year after? It is now informed by what you understand, about your soil. So I mean, that's one example. The second one is around the early warning system. As you know, to be forewarned is to be forearmed.
Yeah.
So in Ethiopia, we have the wheat rust, and now using data science, farmers are now being informed every week about what is likely to happen, if there's going to be a pest, invasion, and so on, and then they get prepared. And it has saved the Ethiopian government almost $200 million per year. Because of the very robust early warning systems. And I can go on and on. We have also managed now to reduce what they call the breeding cycle. Because as we get into the climate change, if you are planting a 10-year-old variety, for example, you are defeated before you start. Because it was not developed in line with the current conditions.
Yeah.
So your ability to turn over varieties faster, it is the one way of making sure that you can now adapt. Because there are new pests, new diseases, but I can tell you today, in the bulk of the countries in South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa, they are planting 30-year-old varieties. And then you wonder why the yields are low. So we need to look at the tools at research and development, innovation level, and even in terms of how politicians are making decisions. So we are living at a better time. We can make use of data science, machine learning, and deploy it for effective decision making.
Before you go on, because I'm sitting here jumping out of my chair, because I just saw a partnership that we can do here from this stage. I sit on the board of Bayer, and they have made a commitment to taking 100 million farmers, smallholder farmers, out of poverty with new seeds and tools. If we could put your data science together with the seeds and tools that they can bring, we can begin to address some of that. 30-year-old seeds in land that is unproductive. We should talk.
I think that's going to happen. I think that's
an opportunity.
I think there's a lunch or a dinner coming up with But to me, this is I think what I just took from what you said, Enoch, is the need for urgent, to speed up. I think sometimes we think very much let's do it, but we need to get it right, but we also need to be able to move and accelerate fast. And Claudia, I want to bring you in because we've been touching on the role of research, and research is so critical. And I want you to just tell us a little bit about CGIAR, because not everyone will necessarily know what that means. But I would love you to tell us what do you focus on? How do you, as an organization or series of organizations fit into this conversation that we're talking about here?
Great. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about CGIAR because our mission is exactly what Enoch is speaking to. Our formal mission is to provide the research and innovation to transform food, land, and water systems in a climate crisis. And it's all about providing the solutions and the science and the evidence to make those changes. And it is built on partnerships, which is part of, and perhaps the most important response to how we speed things up and how we scale things out. So the CGIAR itself is a 50-year-old network of international agricultural research institutions that employ over 9,000 people from 128 nationalities, resident in over 90 countries, and really create that global cadre of food science and agronomists and geneticists and policy analysts. I like to say that this global network that we run are a global network of people whose head is in the science, but their feet are in the soil. They live and work in the countries where these changes need to happen. And they're built on partnerships. We have over 3,000 partnerships that we work with, from the countries and philanthropists and policymakers, but very importantly with national agricultural research and extension systems, small farmers and increasingly agripreneurs, data scientists, et cetera. So what we really work to do is to tackle the big questions, right? We've got 3 billion people who don't have affordable access to proper nutrition. We have 30% of global greenhouse emissions coming from agriculture. Agriculture is the largest user of fresh water. You go through these lists and it sounds like you're blaming agriculture. No, no, no. You're positioning agriculture and food systems in the solution space for these things, for these challenges, in the solution space for sustainability, for nutrition, for biodiversity loss, for inclusion. And so what we do is we focus really on 3 action areas that speak to what we've just discussed. And the first is genetic innovation. It's actually creating these new seed varieties, these new crop varietals that are more resistant to the changing climate, to the greater heat, less water, greater night freezes, or the lack of cool night temperatures. All of this affects seed growth. But we do this in partnership with the National Agricultural Research and Extension Systems. So CGIAR scientists will breed this sort of elite parental materials, working with these national institutions to adapt those varieties to local conditions and to ensure adoption of those varieties as far as possible outside. So that's at the seed level. We then shift up to the agronomy level, the level of food production systems, where we need much more regenerative, much less extractive practices, much more sustainable practices, much more resilient practices so that our farmers have resilient livelihoods as well. And in that space, we can also really make differences in terms of inclusion rather than exploitation, which was an issue we heard about earlier today in the discussions. How do we have much more sustainable and inclusive food systems, resilient agri-food systems we call it, but importantly we also work at a 3rd level, which is systems transformation. And that looks at the economic, social, and natural resource and environmental systems in which food systems operate, because we recognize that this must be done within planetary boundaries. We want it to be done with equity, and there's just tremendous power in integrating this. So you can imagine, for example, we do work on mapping water resources at the regional level, predicting rainfall and water availability, all the way down to the farmer level. And we work on policy. There was a study that just came out by IFPRI and the World Bank that showed that if we intentionally repurposed a small portion of the spending that governments have each year on agriculture toward more green, productivity enhancing and practices that diminish the emission of greenhouse gases, we could diminish agricultural greenhouse emissions by 40% and return millions of hectares to natural uses. So by aligning the policies to guide the food systems in the changes that we want, there's tremendous opportunity there. So when we talk about research, it's research for development.
Yeah.
It's not sitting back and thinking. It's working with partners in the field, looking at the seeds, the way we grow the seeds, and the real world in which all of the food systems exist, and try to find ways to reach those transformations that we've all been hoping for.
Claudia, I want to stay with you for one minute, and where I'm watching our time is going because of the passion on this stage. But I want one example of where a CG research project has gone to scale and really driven that impact.
Okay, just one, that's so hard.
Just one example.
Just one example. Okay, I'm going to give you CCAFS. It's the Climate Change for Agriculture and Food Systems. The CCAFS program has brought climate information, advisories, et cetera, to millions of farmers in West Africa.
Wow.
And that was achieved because of very high-tech modeling, predictive capacity that we do a lot of work trying to capture the power of digital and data science for smallholder farmers. So these really advanced predictive capacities, but working with partners on the ground. So we worked with local radio stations, and we worked with partners who understand the way farmers interpret the probability of rainfall and weather predictions to really target information in usable forms through usable challenges so that millions of small-scale farmers, and remember, 95% of the farm area in Africa is rain-fed. So the prediction that could mean the difference between a successful harvest or not, those sorts of climate advisories can reach millions of people.
Wow. I love that in that there's also the recognition of how you communicate is so important. And I think sometimes we have these great ideas, but they don't get out.
Yep.
And so I love that the research is being communicated and using tools like radio and these kinds of things to actually communicate. Enoch, you're listening here, you know, from your experience, what are you thinking, if we invested in properly, could really be that game change? You talked a little bit about data, about the AI machine learning to accelerate. What else really needs to be invested in?
So maybe the real truth here is there are no silver bullets in development. What we've found to work well is to create these partnerships. As you know, we are one of the big partners to the CG, and we believe that the only global organization whose sole mandate is to help smallholder farmers. They work on crops which maybe private sector don't see attractive. Take, for example, IITA, which is a CG center based in Nigeria. They work on 12 crops, and all of those, they are not global crops. They work on cassava, they work on yam, they work on millet, they work on all these other crops, which are very, very important for that region. If you go back to Edith's presentation, she was showing here finger millet.
Yeah.
But unless you are dedicating money to improve that indigenous crop, you will not see it raising productivity and incomes.
Yeah.
So normally we partner with organizations in those neglected value chains, which are important locally.
Yeah.
So you find that we do a lot of that, including formalizing some of the seed systems, like cassava. Normally, you don't have a formal seed system. The reason why it is not formal, because poor people don't participate in existing systems. Existing systems were never created for poor people. But it is now when you begin to elevate the importance through research, you need to put more money into it and so on. So we are partnering with the CG as one of our global relationships. And as you know, at COP26. We also became part of this very exciting, which I know we will be talking about it tonight and tomorrow, which is the Aim for C, which is, again, an initiative between the US and the UAE. And as you know, we now have more than 30 or so countries that have joined, and more than 70 other NGOs. And the emphasis there it is to make sure that we're developing innovations and food systems that are going to be supporting smallholder farmers. I keep on going back to understanding the role of smallholder farmers because it's not top of mind for people in Europe. The role of agriculture and how many people are involved in agriculture, let's say in the UK, it's 1%. So it's 1% versus 50%. So it will never be top of mind. So we believe at the Gates Foundation it is bringing other partners so that they deeply understand that if you're going to be changing the world, if you're going to be achieving the SDG goals, it won't happen unless we deeply invest in making sure that smallholder farmers, they have a space, they have the services to make them thrive.
I absolutely love how from these big global organizations are really focusing right down and then bringing that back up and then focusing right down. And I think this is so critical. And I think, you know, the voice and the role of smallholder farmers, it's great to see that being elevated. I think so many of us don't know where our food comes from. We don't know the work that goes into it. We complain maybe if the price goes up or it's not available. But I think it's so important to continue to bring this voice, to hear from the farmers, to championing the farmers. And I'm so glad to hear that Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is investing in these farmers. Earthrin, you've worked in the UN, you've worked in INGOs, all different sectors. What do you see is the ideal place for investment, and where do we have to put our energy to kind of move this forward?
Thank you for that question. We have a problem in our community right now that many of you probably aren't even aware of. We've heard about how climate is affecting smallholder farmers across the globe. The climate conversation, when I sat in a conversation with leaders from the climate community just yesterday at the security conference, they talked for an hour and a half, and the food transition was never mentioned. They talked about the trillions of dollars that will go into investing in mitigation for supporting energy transition. We must get food into and agriculture into the climate conversation because the financing that is necessary to support the work that we've all been talking about here today will go missing unless we have our seats at those tables as that money is being developed. Gunhild, before she leaves, I will say, led the food community in the development of the Good Food Financing Network as a part of as one of the outcomes of the UN Food System Summit. And we went to Glasgow to bang this exact drum about the importance of food systems in the climate conversation. The food system, as most of you probably know, emits 25% of the greenhouse gases. If all we do is address the energy challenge, we won't meet the greenhouse gas emission reduction goal. We must address the greenhouse gas emissions in the food system, and the food system is the system most vulnerable to the climate crisis. And so because our voices are not being heard, and because there's a lack of recognition that it's not just about nature-based solutions, it must be about agricultural and food solutions specifically. It's not just about planting more trees, more peat moss, more peat centers. That's a communications challenge that we must all embrace as we go towards COP27, which is in Egypt, where Egypt has said they're going to focus on adaptation, the $100 billion that was promised for adaptation for smallholder farmers and others across the developing world who were not the causes of the climate crisis that we have, but are facing all of the detrimental impact of the climate crisis, and putting food as a priority, the food system as a priority for the conversation. All of you need to make it your business to ensure that that you as leaders are participating in those conversations. Yeah. That is what is going to hopefully begin to drive more capital into the space that we need to support the types of partnerships that will deliver the opportunity for smallholders, whether in sub-Saharan Africa or in South Asia, to deliver the food that is necessary to feed that 80% of the population that they feed, regardless of the impact of the climate crisis.
This is an amazing conversation. We could go on for a long time, but I think action is key here, and this conversation is focusing our thoughts around smallholders, around the role of data, finance, research, in really driving this forward. But it's also around connection and connection. And we've seen a connection even developing on stage, a conversation about potential opportunities. And so I think as we're moving forward, I would love to just hear a reflection from each of you. I'm going to see if we've got time for one question, but then I want you to think about your reflection, and I'm going to give you 30 seconds each after we hear from this question. So I'd like to remind you, if you would like to ask a question, put your hand up, keep your mask on if you can, and please state your name and where you're from, and then keep your questions succinct, please. And ask one question, and we'll go. Yes, please, sir.
It's good to see you again, Paul. My name is Charles McChilton. I'm with Second Harvest Japan. I was surprised that the majority of us answered that the major tool for change is political will. And yet, I don't hear the panelists touching on that. And I don't just mean the politicians themselves, but holistically in a whole spectrum there. I know from my own space as a practitioner that it really does come down to the political will for change to come about. And I'd just like to hear from each one of you how you see that might be driven, that political will for change.
Who wants to take that one first?
Sure, I can jump in here. I made reference to a few countries that you're seeing that are making progress. It is basically driven by the political will. Our role, I would say, in most of the conversations with the political leaders, it's not about the what. They know the what. Mm-hmm. Every leader wants a better country, better citizens, economic growth, but it is the how to get there. And that's where a lot of our tools, like in prioritizing policies, what is the return on investment, investing in agriculture versus anything else? It is talking about what the World Bank says, if you investing in smallholder agriculture is twice as much in reducing poverty than investment elsewhere. You need to come up with the numbers. In that country, you look at the value chains, you look at the trade-offs the country can make on their own. You look at prioritizing your own policies, which will work again with IFPRI, talking about the RIAPA modeling and so on. If you put money here, this is what you get. So it is now equipping them with the data and the evidence. That will give them the confidence that we need to make sure that this is the right investment. Because it's not obvious. As if the ministers of agriculture, of finance. In that meeting, there's a huge debate in terms of, do we fund this versus the other? So providing them with the tools so they can make better decisions is part of what we are trying to really help.
No, I think, Claudia, did you want to add anything?
I think that the key is exactly as Enoch has said. We need to illustrate what can be done and why. We know hunger in schools is a terrible thing, but you listen to someone like Wawira showing such a compelling solution, and you're ready to move. We need to demonstrate how and why, and the numbers matter, and they're there. The one scaling that I didn't suggest to you, Paul, was that spillovers of the rice development that has taken place at CGIAR for the developing world now generates over $10 billion annually in value from CG parentage rice. And half the wheat planted in the world has CGIAR parentage. So there are benefits to what's being done well beyond those that are immediate. And we need to be able to demonstrate that in order to entice and motivate and drive the kind of change that we do need supported by policymakers.
I agree with everything that's been said, and I just think that it's about building that narrative that is beyond another program. We've spent, what you will hear from funders, from governments, is we've spent billions of dollars on development programs that have not created the transition in the food system, the opportunity for farmers, the types of development across the system, in whether you're talking on the continent or South Asia or Latin America. But the reality is we don't tell our story well about what we do right to support the building of the coalitions of support that we need that will create that pivotal will, political will that is required.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's so critical to, I mean, this event, even just the being a part of this event and listening and hearing, hopefully you've had some things connect, some conversations, some ideas, some relationships. And I think relationships and partnerships are critical, and this is something the SDGs are built around. It's part of how we move this forward, but it's so easy when we're working on a particular focus to lose how do we connect? But I love that these stories and what you've shared, these kind of investments are all about those relationships. And as we kind of come to a close in this panel, I would love to give you just a moment for some final reflections that you would do as a takeaway for us. What would you want people to think about in terms of this need for acceleration? What's a reflection? Who wants to go first?
Sure, let me jump right in. I think that it's the enormity and the urgency of the issue here. If there's anyone in the room or joining us virtually who didn't hear today about an issue that is of fundamental and deep importance to them, then we haven't told the story correctly. Food systems touch everything that matters to us. They touch everything from climate to inclusion to poverty to sustainability to biodiversity to the very most fundamental thing that we all do every day, if we're lucky with our friends and our families, which is to have a proper and nourishing meal. And the urgency of framing this issue, Earthrin mentioned the fact that in climate, we don't talk enough about agriculture. Johan Rockström, a wonderful scientist who sort of brought you the construct of planetary boundaries, said, with climate change, there are 3 Fs. There's fuel, there is food, and then there are footnotes. That food systems need to be on the same level of fuel. We cannot achieve the Paris targets without reforming our food systems. If that's not enough, all of the other issues that we have raised here today, it's the enormity of the issue, it's the power of the issue, of what we can change with food systems that's so exciting if we guide the transformation of our food systems toward the food systems that we really want for ourselves. And if we recognize that it can only be done in these tremendous partnerships with great respect for the fact that food and food systems are so socially important and so personally important and specific to everyone on the planet.
Wow.
Maybe my last point is we are living at a better time where we can harness the power of data, machine learning, and these are not foreign tools. You can have this in your own country and you can increase the efficiency, you can reduce the cost. Remember, we are looking at how do we bring people who are poor into the system, so that they are not just mere passive recipients of aid, but to make sure that they're active in the existing marketing systems. You can only do that when you begin to understand what they are grappling with, as what you would do for a customer. That's why you want even our research system to look at smallholder farmers as their bosses. You know, philanthropy is paying them, but the real bosses are the people who are trying to uplift. When you begin to understand them, it means you are going to bring in tools that are relevant, that are answering to their challenges. And then you can now come up with other systems around them. Some are farmer-facing, others will be now helping to build the national systems. All this you can get to understand a lot more if you invest in data science. And I am very, encouraged. Even if you look at Kenya, the mobile money, Kenya has become like the center of the world. In terms of how M-Pesa is changing everything. That's exactly what is needed. We can do that in almost every area, and this can be homegrown. And then you partner with the private sector who are actually generating the actual innovation. But the application and its use is really a partnership between the global and the regional as well as the local. And then bringing in private sector, public sector. So I'm so excited that the time we live here, we can do much more.
Absolutely.
Yes, challenges, but we can leapfrog them.
Absolutely.
I'll just close very quickly by saying that you're absolutely right. We need to create political will. We need to move conversations like this one forward. I loved Ndidi's babies on the screen. When I was the executive director of the World Food Program, I would not take a picture with a baby on the continent or in South Asia with flies on their eyes and a bloated belly. The world has seen too many of those children. They need to see that we can develop programs that work and create healthy children, that there are healthy children in every place around this globe, that there's not a mother out there who wants to stand in a line to feed her child, that people want to work to develop the opportunities for their children to live a better life than they do, just like every mother and father across the globe. The one thing we should have learned from this pandemic is we can't build walls high enough to keep the problems over there from over here. And so it's in all of our interest for us to invest in the tools that will support adaptation of our food systems transition, that will support mitigation in the areas that is necessary, that we provide the opportunity for every child, every family to have access to nutritious food.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank our panel. Thank you, Claudia, Enoch, Earthrin. I appreciate you all. Thank you.
Wow. That was absolutely powerful. What an unbelievable discussion. Thank you, Paul, to you and your panelists. It was absolutely great. Such great insight and a way for all of us to carve a way into striving for good food for all.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, the focus on smallholder farmers, the different connection points that we bring together, it's just absolutely... It's just great to have today and to be able to be here at Expo having this conversation and hearing from so many amazing people. We've just had such great speakers and you've done such a great job. Thank you, guiding us through.
Awesome. I think you can't leave here without wanting to change yourself and change the community around you. Now, I know there's an exciting exhibition outside. Please tell me about the interactive activities, the tastings, and everything that's all happening on the outside.
Yeah, so we wanted to, you can't talk about good food for all without having some food. And also seeing some different produce, some different products and flavors and ingredients. And so outside we've got a number of different exhibits for you to engage with. And so we want you to not run off, but to hang around, say hello to somebody, go and speak to somebody and try something. So we've got the Expo sustainability team has brought in a number of things for us to try. There's some honey there, I think, that's grown on site here at Expo. There's a community design board, and so go and check out what that's all about. There's some salicornia. If you haven't tried that, it grows with saline or salty sand. And so check out a few of those things. But it's really cool, actually.
Yeah.
There's a number of other elements that have been pulled together. The DEC catering team has pulled together a vegetarian tasting menu that you can try and go and talk to the chefs. It's really important to talk to the farmers and to talk to the chefs and those that are engaged in growing food, but also in pulling it together. And so you can also learn a little bit about the best practice program that Expo's been doing, which is really about highlighting some of the best practice from around the world. Expo is all about the world coming together. And so best practice is really about where you can go and learn about some of the things that are happening around the world. So there's so much there to do. Check it out. And please don't just run off, I guess. This is the part of Food and Agriculture and Livelihoods Week, and there's going to be lots of other cool activities to engage in.
You're making me so hungry, so I'm definitely going to try some of the food. So who's leading some of these experiences and tastings?
Yeah, so outside, the Expo Sustainability team is going to be there. I think there is also, we've got some tastings from El Kabulim, which is the African food hall. If you haven't checked that out on site, it's the first African food hall here. And you just need to go and check some of the different flavors, the different ingredients that are there, and how they're pulled together. We've brought some of that taste in. We also have Emirates Biofarm, and a number of us were able to go out to Emirates Biofarm. If you haven't and you live in Dubai, when it opens back up, you should try and get out there. It's absolutely amazing, this farm out in the desert. And it's an organic farm, one of the largest in the UAE. And the farmers have bought in some of that produce. Go and have a look, take a selfie, tell people about today's conversation. And we're also going to have, there's a photo competition that was part of the UN Food System Summit out there, and a range of other things going on. So it's going to be really cool.
Fantastic. Now, of course, this event was part of the Food, Agriculture and Livelihood Week here at Expo. But what else can we expect in terms of events and activations? I know there's lots.
Yeah, there's so much going on this week. So tomorrow there's a business forum, there's an event on the Sahel, there's lots of different events, and I encourage you to get online, get on the app, check out the program and register. But I also want to just encourage you, today's conversation has been around this whole Good Food for All. And if you want to learn more about it, if you check out Good Food for All _SDGs, you can follow it on Instagram, on other social platforms, or head to goodfoodforall.com and find out more about the campaign and how you can be involved.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you, Lorna.
Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached the end of today's flagship event, Good Food for All, how to accelerate ambition and scale to drive impact. Now, what remains to be said is a big thank you. Thank you to all our amazing speakers who've come across the world, literally, to share their wisdom, knowledge, and inspiration with us today. Thanks to you, our guests, for joining us today and asking such engaging questions. Thank you again to Her Excellency Rem Al Hashimi and Expo 2020 Dubai, as well as PepsiCo for co-hosting today's event. And thank you to all of you out there, farmers, youth, activists, chefs, mothers, fathers, teachers, citizens of the world, for doing what you do each day, driving forward progress on the transformation of food systems and on working towards making good food for all a reality. Please feel free to linger around, as Paul said earlier, meet each other, check out the activations, and look at some of the amazing Good Food for All photography display. We hope you all had a fantastic time here at Expo in Dubai, and we will enjoy, I hope that you enjoy more of the engaging events and activities during Food, Agriculture, and Livelihood Week. I'm Lorna Maseko. It's been an absolute honor to be your host this afternoon. Have a fantastic day.